What's the most significant you just messed with the wrong person moment you've witnessed? I work in a law office and regularly have to go file documents with the court. I have learned, from watching one interaction, not to mess with the clerks at the filing window. A lot of people probably wouldn't believe how detailed the rules are for submitting documents to the court. There are rules regarding the type of paper you can use, the exact spacing of the heading on the paper, the exact measurements of the 2-hole punches at the top of the paper, etc. There are literally dozens of rules on how to format your filings. In my experience, these rules are rarely enforced. The clerks will reject documents if there are major errors but will usually let things slide, like your 2-hole punches not being precisely 2¾ inches apart. But there was one day where I saw a clerk take sweet revenge against someone who totally had it coming. I was standing in line, waiting to file something, and a notoriously huge prick of an attorney got called up to the window. The clerk asked him something like, "I'm really sorry, sir, but you're missing an attachment to this form." He reacted as if she had just stood from her chair, flipped him the bird, and went to defecate on his mother's grave. He starts yelling about how she didn't know what she was doing. A trained ape could do her job. He would be complaining to her supervisor, and on and on. He goes stomping away, and she looks much calmer than you would expect for someone who just got reamed out by this enormous dirtbag. I get called up to her window and say something like, "I am so sorry you had to deal with that." She replies, "It's fine. He's on my list now." I'm curious, so I ask what she means. Her response was fantastic. She says he handles a lot of family law cases. He'll be wanting to file things here, and his paperwork is bound to land on my desk. For people like him, I get out the formatting sections of the rules of court, and I make sure he's followed every one of them. She points to my filing and says, "Your 2-hole punches look off. You see how one is higher than the other? They are supposed to be a certain distance from the top of the page. I'm not going to reject yours, but next time he drops something off at the filing box, you better believe I'm going to bust out my ruler." I say how awesome that is, but once he sees the reason his document was rejected, he'll just have an assistant fix it or whatever. She replies, "We don't have to tell him why it was rejected specifically, just that it violated some rule of formatting. He can figure that out for himself, if he ever wants to have another document filed." What are some things people mistake for love? Love isn't staying up till 3 a.m. in the night to talk to each other every third day. That's not love, it's immaturity. Love isn't sacrificing your goals for someone. Instead, you help each other achieve your goals. Love isn't chasing them after they leave you and saying that, "Please, I love you, don't leave me." That's not love, that's just you being needy on the inside for someone who doesn't care about you, because if it was love, they would have stayed and figured things out with you. Love isn't about how perfect a relationship you have or how perfect a partner you have. It's about how you accept each other's imperfections and are willing to put in consistent efforts. Because in the end, what matters is how the both of you go through your tough times and make the best out of your beautiful relationship. Love isn't constantly trying to make sure of the fact that your partner might cheat on you because you are scared to lose them. That's just a lack of trust on your side because of some experience that you might have. It's not wrong to feel this way, but it will lead to unnecessary drama. Trust is the underlying foundation of a relationship, so you should work on that first. Love isn't depending on your partner for everything. It's about also having a life of your own. Relationship is a part of your life, not your life. You should have your own life, goals, and friends as well. Love is supposed to be healing and full of self-growth. Love isn't some happy fairy tale, it's who we find our end all be all with. My for the streets girlfriend has been researching how to cheat on me. With her coworker too. I found out around 6 months ago that my live-in girlfriend of 6 years has a crush on her coworker. I found out when I borrowed her laptop to do my taxes and clicked into the Google search bar to type the name of the tax service I use. What I was confronted with was her recent search history that went something like this. "I love my boyfriend, but I want to F my coworker. I have a crush on my coworker. Coworker's name, city we live in. Erotic fiction about cheating. Is it wrong to fantasize about cheating?" And so on. 6 months have gone by and we have worked through some of our issues. I do not believe that she cheated on me, although I do feel as though I trust her less than I used to. I know there is nothing objectively wrong with finding someone attractive, even if it's a coworker. Hell, I've been in that same situation. She just didn't happen to stumble upon evidence of it like I unfortunately did. All in all, it felt like a weird blemish on our relationship that we got past with some time and communication. Until the other day. I'm not proud of it, and to be honest, I'm not really even sure what drove me to do it. But I intentionally snooped through her phone. What I found this time has me very confused and unsure of how to feel. Basically, she Facebook stalks this guy every couple days. They are not friends on Facebook, and she has seemingly never had any contact with him on social media other than going through his pictures constantly. Not too bad, right? Well, it gets worse. She has also constantly been reading articles like how to tell if he wants you or manifesting your specific person, or how to make him fall for you. Tons of stuff like that. Now maybe I'm just insecure or something because the guy in question is objectively way more attractive than I am. But to me it really seems as though my girlfriend is consciously trying to get with this guy and I guess just keeping me around for security? I'm so confused and really just need to hear what others think of this. My for the streets girlfriend has been researching how to cheat on me. My girlfriend, 28, cheated on me, 26, but says that she was coerced. My girlfriend of 6 years. Have pets and an apartment and everything else except kids and rings. Cheated on me about a month ago with her coworker. They went to a bar after work with a group of other coworkers. As the night began to wind down and people left, he invited her back to his place for more drinks. She accepted. She went home with him and continued to drink, and he offered her 2 mushroom capsules. She took them. I am fuzzy on the exact details of how this transpired because I am a wreck right now and think I may be blocking it out to an extent. But they ended up laying in his bed together watching a movie. He made advances towards her which she claims to have rejected. He pushed the issue and asked her to at least touch it. "You have to." Again, I don't know how long this went on or how much of a fight she really put up, but basically she gave him a gawk to competition, letting him finish in her mouth, and then spent the night at his house before leaving. She claims that this whole incident was largely not her fault because he took advantage of her while she was effed up. It is also important to mention some relationship history from the past year. In the past year she has asked me twice how I'd feel about an open relationship and has admittedly had a crush on a different coworker for many months. Maybe I am too hurt to see things clearly, but it really seems to me that this whole coercion thing is just a poor way to try to feel better about her actions and avoid accountability. Even if the guy was creepy, which it definitely sounds like he was. Why was she at his house in the first place? What did she think was going to happen? Any insight would be appreciated. I'm a complete mess right now. She's my whole world, and truth be told, she is pretty much all I have had. I am leaving to go out of town for a couple weeks and will be making a decision on what to do going forward. It's also worth mentioning that she is very upset with me right now because I sought support from some of my close friends and family. She is seemingly more preoccupied with her reputation and what others will think than my feelings or trying to win back any trust. I have a feeling the answer is no, but was it a mistake to tell my close friends and family? Why did you break up with your last girlfriend? She had intimacy with her professor, while I was paying all the bills, including her tuition. I basically paid her teacher to rail my girlfriend. We dated for 2 years when she got into a master's program out of state. We were in love and going to be married, so I was going to move with her, putting my doctorate on hold. Before she graduates, her phone goes off and I bring it to her, only to notice she had received an email to an account I had never heard of. I looked and it was from her professor. The professor that had a reputation when it came to trading good grades for intimacy. So I investigated and the emails were damaging. I asked her to be honest with me and she told me the most they ever did was kiss once, and if I give her another chance she promised to stay faithful. I loved her, so I agreed. Literally 1 week later she went out of town and I just got up and left, leaving behind a small note detailing why I'm leaving. When she got back she called me frantically saying that she wanted to try to work it out. I told her that I was done and didn't have any interest in talking to her anymore. When my girlfriend realized I wasn't budging she said that she was late. I looked her straight in the eye and told her it wasn't mine to show her professor the test results. She insisted that it was mine, so I told her to come find me in 9 months. Edit, I sent the professor's wife a copy of all the emails and I heard this caused their marriage to end as well as the professor getting fired. My ex got expelled too. Never back down, never what?
Rich people of Reddit who married someone significantly poorer. What surprised you about their previous way of life? My significant other said, today I made rent, meaning today I've earned enough, accumulated enough to pay the rent, and I realized that this is a monthly accomplishment to someone with no fixed income, salary. My husband grew up in a family where they were comfortable but on a strict budget. 6 kids and mom on disability. My family had no budget. One day we were at the grocery store and he always insists on walking up and down every aisle. I finally lost it because he was taking so long and asked him why he did it. Growing up we could only spend $100 a week on groceries for all of us. I always had to put what I wanted back because we couldn't afford it. Now I can afford whatever I want, so I like to look at everything I could have. Sandwiches. When I made him a sandwich I only put 1 thin slice of meat in it. He couldn't believe that was how I had sandwiches growing up. My experience is from the opposite perspective. I was the poor one. It absolutely floored me how my wife acts when something broke, like a car, appliances, clothes, etc. As a child living below the poverty line, replacing a tire or other necessities was a disaster, requiring tricky trade-offs in the budget or just plain acceptance of just how boned you were. When my wife's phone broke, I went into full panic mode while she shrugged and said, "We can just a new one this afternoon." And then we did. Honestly, food insecurity. When we were first married she would get visibly uneasy if the food in the house was running low. She never overate or anything, she was just always concerned about it. A lot of times when she was younger, she went hungry. On the humorous side though, she hates camping. Her answer is always the same: I camped because it was fun. She camped because they couldn't afford hotels.
Mother-in-law tries to ruin the birth of my child. My little one is just 4.5 weeks old. We had a bit of a bumpy road with my wife's mom, starting when I was barely even pregnant. My wife and I had been trying to have a baby for a while, and we went through a couple of tough times with pregnancies that didn't work out last year. So, when my wife got pregnant this time, we were super prepared. Part of our planning was about how we wanted things to go when it was time for the baby to arrive. My wife wanted it to be just me and her friend, who's also a photographer, in the delivery room. We thought it would be nice for the family to wait a bit and give us some time to bond with our baby before they came in. It turns out that this is what the hospital normally does too. We didn't know that at first. We didn't want a crowd of people waiting outside while we were dealing with everything inside. We told everyone about our plans early on, and everyone was cool with it, except my mother-in-law. She kept saying, "No, I'm going to be there, you can't keep me away." We tried to explain, but she didn't want to listen. As time went on, she got more and more upset about it. It's important to know that my mother-in-law has a history of being really controlling and not so nice to her own kids. When the week my wife was supposed to give birth came around, things got even worse. She started arguing with us and being really mean. She called me names and said I was trying to keep her out. She even told lies about me to the rest of the family. It was confusing because she even tried to turn my own mom against me. When my wife finally gave birth, It was late at night and there were some unexpected complications. Our baby had to spend a little while in the neonatal intensive care unit. My wife was tired, and I was running back and forth between her and the baby. But my mother-in-law was getting angry because we weren't paying attention to her. Out of nowhere, she showed up at the hospital in the middle of the night, causing a big scene. The hospital security stopped her from coming in because it was late and she was being really loud and upset. Keep in mind, the hospital doesn't let anyone visit at that time, especially not people causing trouble. But, guess what? She blamed me for this too, saying I made the rules. My wife had been trying to talk to her mom and calm her down even when she was in labor. She told her mom to come to visit at a reasonable time, around 8 in the morning, with her boyfriend and their other child. But my mother-in-law didn't listen. We had to call the police and even tried to get a restraining order, but it's a bit complicated because the hospital is in a different place from where we live. We started building a record of what was happening, though. We talked to the police a few times. Since then, my mother-in-law has kept saying bad things about us, but my wife has been doing her best to set the record straight. All the decisions we made were my wife's choices from the beginning, and she's been trying to correct the things my mother-in-law has been saying. Right now, my mother-in-law hasn't seen our baby, and she's not allowed near him. If she tries, she could get in trouble with the law. We've made sure to let the police know what's going on. After seeing how she treated her own kids for years, I'm not going to let her be around my child if she keeps acting this way. She won't be babysitting him, and there won't be any time with him without someone else there. I don't regret that my mother-in-law hasn't met her grandson. He spent a great time with the rest of our family, and everyone else has been really happy to meet him. He's a joyful baby, and he's not missing out on anything. Smug structural engineers called me a fake engineer. So I paid the whole dinner and left them speechless. My family was invited by my wife's best friend to their youngest daughter's birthday. It was a small dinner and 2 more couples were invited. Their husbands are structural engineers and their children are friends with the celebrant. We have met these people before when we were out and dining with Eric's family, so it was not awkward although we only know them by their names. Anyway, we settled at one table and the teens at another. At the teen table, my daughter ordered sushi, appetizers, mocktails, and shrimp with scallops while our table was flowing along with sake and a few top-shelf drinks. We also have our appetizers, drinks, and dinners. We are all paying for ourselves and I see the guys seem to be in competition for who can spend the most. The celebrant's father and I chuckle at them and stay out of the fray. We were all sharing stories and a good laugh. We were really enjoying their company minus all the smug remarks they seemed to point at me for being an agricultural engineer. Then, one of them hears my daughter's order and says to her, "Careful now, your daddy is only an agricultural engineer. He doesn't make as much as us real engineers." I was slightly surprised by this comment but decided not to respond to it. For context, I'm an agricultural engineer with a PhD. I work for governments, private investors, and several agro corporations, and I own a consulting firm. I help build sustainable reusable gardens. This work allows me to travel to poorer countries and help them use what they have to start growing their own food. Apparently these men thought all I did was travel to impoverished places and teach people to dig in the dirt. They believed I did all this work for free and therefore made very little money. I'm not rich by any stretch, but I am comfortable. We don't do extravagance, so we have savings and my wife works. However, in 2023, I was awarded a handsome contract to design tower gardens in several states. It's a 7-figure contract over 3 years. Back to dinner, these guys asked me about the most ridiculous things. Like, is it good to grow onions and carrots in the same garden? And were laughing at me and my work until their wives told them to stop. I chalk it up to drunken arrogance and don't even bother to answer. Eric was laughing so hard he almost fell out of his chair. Apparently, he is one of the guys' CPA as well and Eric knows the ins and outs of both our finances. He taunts Eric to tell the table what he brought home last year after bonuses. Eric pulls up the figures on the phone and tells us. Well, it's about 1/3 of what I brought home in 2023. Eric says, "I have yours up, want me to share?" I decline and he nods. Then cue another round of taunts. I went to the restroom and found the waiter. I decided to pay for the whole check and leave a generous tip on top of what they added for the party. After our sorbet, the waiter thanked me in front of everyone for the tip and wished everyone a good night. Both stared at me for a moment, smirked, and said, "You don't have to use your monthly budget to prove anything, we totally understand." Pissed, I told Eric to tell them my income last year, after which I simply said goodnight. Absolutely petty but gratifying. What's the one piece of advice you have for people at parties? Leave your medicine at home. I accidentally drugged an entire party. My friend Sophie and I had a plan to hold a finals party. After countless all-nighters of constant studying and making up assignments, we decided one last party before we finish was what we needed to motivate us to do well for our final exam. We invited over about 20 of our friends and we started prepping everything. My job was to bring Jello shots, Henny, Eddies, and Gold Flake tequila. After I went to the store to buy everything I needed to make the Jello shots, the Gold Flake tequila, and the Henny, I was on my way to a dispensary. After speeding down the highway, since I was low-key cutting it on time, I didn't notice the red light right in front of me. I slammed my brakes and my tire screecher and I thought I broke in time, but not in time for the car behind me to stop. They rear-ended the hell out of me. We sorted things out and it was time to get the party ready. I got home and I just mixed snack pack Jello with alcohol and set up trays for them and the other bottles we had. Everything was right and ready except for one thing, the edibles. I completely forgot about them cause of the accident. There was no time to get them since the nearest dispensary was 40 minutes away and guests started filling the room. That's when I remembered I still had those CBD sleep caps from Santa Cruz. I offered them to my guests and told them all they were edibles and to just try the other things, hoping that would distract them from the fact they didn't precisely take edibles. Technically they were edibles since they had CBD in them. After about an hour of partying, we were all knocked out cold. Most of us didn't even sleep in beds. Some slept in the bathtub, the couch, the floor, the table. I've never heard of a sleeping party in an apartment before. We all woke up at 7 a.m. nearly almost simultaneously. Everyone was so confused about what the hell it took to get knocked out. I told them I gave them sleeping pills and that I was sorry, but that I didn't lie since again they're technically edibles. Surprisingly everyone was okay with that. Most of them thanked me saying they've never slept that well. It felt like they woke up from sleep after surgery. It was just pure rest and clean recharge. Everyone woke up in time to take their exams and everyone actually did pretty well. Who knew we didn't need a party, just a good night's rest. My daughter's autistic brother is ruining her life. I'm so sad for her. My daughter is 9, her brother is 11. He isn't my son. He's higher needs and can be violent. He has an autistic dog who has helped him a ton and my daughter's mom got her a cat a year ago, to kind of balance out. I have her Friday to Monday, but I'm heavily allergic to cats, prescribed allergy meds just to be around my daughter. I went into anaphylaxis with the over-the-counter stuff, and still feel like I have the worst cold in history when she comes over, so the cat doesn't travel with her. On Monday I drove her home. She went inside and I heard her screaming almost immediately. The cat had gone into her brother's room and pissed in his special blankets. These blankets are a very sensitive subject for him. He broke his stepdad's wrist when the man tried to pick one up. The reaction was horrific. He, apparently, had walked into the cat on the blankets, and in a fit of rage dragged the cat so hard he shattered one of its legs. This was 10 minutes before my daughter walked in. I just had to sit there and listen to her scream because she'd picked the cat up and I couldn't touch her after that. They took the cat to the vet and ultimately he was euthanized. I suspect there was something more than a shattered leg, but that's all I was told about. My daughter is heartbroken. Her mom and stepdad have told her she can't get a new cat due to the risk her brother poses. She's put his ashes in her bedroom at my place. To be honest, I think she's trying to move full time. As soon as she turns 12 and can pick, she 100% can. I've told her she can get a puppy with me if she wants, but she doesn't really like dogs. She's asked to stay with me full time for a bit, which her mom is barely tolerating. I feel horrible. I can't protect my baby. I understand her brother can't help it. He's in therapy every day of the week. But as he gets older he's getting worse. My ex had a baby last year that was adopted by her sister-in-law because he was just too dangerous. It makes me so angry she let that baby go somewhere safe but won't let our daughter stay with me full time. He's stamping out her fire. It was her birthday in February, and I got her a sequin dress which she loved. But told me she couldn't take it back to her mom's because it would make her brother angry. She's 9. He's got her terrified to wear her favorite clothes in her own home and now he's ended her best friend. I'm so angry. It's not his fault but I want to shake him into next week. I see him and I seethe with rage. I try to remain sympathetic, she does. Tell me she doesn't mind, that it's okay because he doesn't understand. And he really doesn't. Even now he's all happy smiles. When I took her back to her mom's to pick up her cat's ashes he ran to give her a hug and kiss her cheek and tell her that he loves her. She said she doesn't love him anymore and that makes her sad, which I understand. She can't forgive him. I don't blame her. I need to get my feelings out and remain okay for her. So here I am. I don't know what to do from here. Probably go to court, again, and fight for custody, again, and maybe this time I'll win. Who knows?
I am so broke criminals won't even mug me. In short, this dude on a bike asked me for directions, then told me he had a gun. He asked for my phone, I gave it to him. He looked at it, then at me, and asked me to give him my other phone, the one I was hiding. I was like, man, that's the only phone I have. He told me he would search my bag, frisk me, but I kept my cool. Do it, I got nothing. Disappointed, he gave it back to me. Take it, I don't want that shit. He then asked for my money. I was carrying $1.23 in change. He looked at me with such disappointment and didn't even take that either. He literally gave it back. It was just awkward. He kept talking, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, maybe cause I maintained my resting poker face even though he told me he was going to kill me, he was like, dude, you know what? I like your style. Stay in school. Then he sped off on his bike. I can't decide if he was a nice dude for that or a piece of shit.
My girlfriend is TikTok famous and I hate it. So for a bit of context, me and my girlfriend have been together almost 7 years. She was never super obsessed with social media or anything like that. Hardly posted, kept to herself and all that. Then she started to get hooked on TikTok. At first she didn't post. She would just watch it for hours and hours but eventually ended up making an account and posted quite a lot. She never liked the idea of working for some corporate company making someone else richer. She always wanted to be self-employed and I applauded that. Anyway, one day she'd posted a video and it was blowing up and this is truly when she became obsessed. She started to tell me, this is it, this is what I'm gonna do. I supported her unconditionally and told her that if the bills are paid I couldn't give a dang what she did. At the time of writing this post her followers are sitting in the millions. I don't know how many people are gonna read this but I don't want to say exactly because I don't want anyone to find out who she actually is. A few problems are starting to arise. She earns good money, I can't fault her for that. She actually earns more than me and I'm by no means an average earner in the UK. For one, her health is starting to take a hit. She never eats properly, doesn't sleep and all that. She is obsessed with numbers. If a TikTok or Instagram post performs badly, then she will be in a foul mood. It truly seems like the only hit of dopamine she can get is from her posts doing well. She's slowly turning into someone I do not know anymore, and it's killing me. I'm lucky if I get half an hour a day where we have a normal conversation that doesn't regard her career. When we have arguments, she also starts to call me working class scum and saying that I work for literal pennies. I just wish that she would be humble and more down to earth. This girl is not the person I fell in love with.
Steal from me? I will sell everything you own to teach you a lesson. I was 18 to 19 at the time. This happened in 2020. My girlfriend, who I'm not with anymore obviously, who I'll call Viola, lived with me at the time. We dated from March of 2020 to December of 2020. She was very abusive and toxic. She moved in with me because she had problems with her mother. So at the time, me and her were living with my mother. I had withdrawn $350 from the bank to give to my sister as a birthday present. Viola stole that money out of my wallet. I asked her about it because she's done this stuff before. She said that it wasn't a big deal because I was her girlfriend, and that it was a measly $350. I told her to give it back. She said no. She spent it on alcohol, weed, and a lot of snacks for herself. I was livid. I was plotting my revenge. That morning I found out she was cheating on me with many different women. She left to go to work. She worked from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 3 to 4 days a week. She left around 7:30 a.m. I locked the front door. All of her stuff was in my room. She moved in with me after her mother threw her out. She had a big collection of name brand clothes and shoes. She had Timberlands, Adidas, Nike, Jordans, Crocs, etc. She had Nike clothes, Van clothes, Hollister clothes, and many other expensive name brands. I packed her shoes and clothes into one huge container. At 12 p.m. that day I went to Plato's Closet. I only got $135 for all of her clothes and shoes. At this point the only clothes she had were her work shoes and work clothes. I sold all of her PlayStation games and only got $50 for them. So at this point I only got $185 back out of the $350 she stole. I took her PlayStation and drowned it in a bathtub of water. I took all of her underwear and bras and socks. I put them in a trash can and put lighter fluid on them. I went back inside and made sure I changed clothes and washed my hands off really good so I wouldn't burn myself. I went back out and lit a match and set all of her underwear, socks and bras on fire. I put it out after everything was burnt. I took her books and threw them in the garbage. I took all of her art supplies and gave it away to Goodwill. My mother was also mad at her other items she had. I tossed outside. I tossed her batteries, her toy cars, and her lighters outside in the yard. I flushed all of her weed down the toilet. I poured all of her alcohol in the toilet. My mother knew I was splitting up with her because of all the things she did. My mother changed the locks and helped me get rid of the rest of her stuff before she got off work. I blocked Viola off my Facebook. I posted screenshots of her messages to other women on my Facebook page. I had a long day getting revenge. I gave my sister the money I got from selling all of Viola's stuff. It was for a birthday gift. I messaged her while she was at work. I told her, I'm done with you. I'm not your girlfriend anymore. You are a cheating, lying, no good thief. I was hoping she would see it when she got off. She saw it at 8:30 p.m. She blew up my phone and messages. I ignored her. She came back to my mom's house. She was banging and knocking on the door. She was demanding her stuff back. I told her to look in the front yard. She screamed I had more poop than that. Where the F is the rest of my stuff? I told her, it's gone. Think of it as restitution for the money you stole from me. She was so angry her face was beet red. She eventually left and went back to her mom's.
Redditors who have walked in on their significant other cheating, what were the next 30 minutes like? I didn't walk in on it happening, but I saw it coming and did everything I could to stop it. Including telling my girlfriend that if the woman I suspected her having a thing with came to my apartment when I wasn't there, it was over between us. She constantly told me nothing was happening between them, so I gave her the benefit of the doubt. When I was out of state for a funeral a week later, I went through the Google Home app and noticed recordings of the Google Home speaker being used after midnight. I listened to them, and heard the recordings of my now ex-girlfriend and the other woman using my Google Home. I came back home 4 days later, had this on my chest for 4 days, and asked my girlfriend as we laid in bed next to each other if anyone came to the apartment while I was gone. She looked me in the eyes and said no. I said, again, was, girl's name, in my apartment while I was home for a funeral? She continued looking me in the eyes, laying inches away from me, and said no. I picked up my phone and played the Google Home recording, and asked her, then who the F is this? She was a deer in the headlights. She couldn't speak for 5 minutes. I told her she was a liar, a manipulator, and a effing coward, and told her to get the F out.
I was surprised when my parents called me ungrateful in a Facebook post after they forgot my birthday, so I surprised them with my comment and embarrassed them. I just had my birthday last week. The only problem is that no one in my family remembered. My maternal grandfather passed away about a month ago, and my entire family, mom, dad, and 2 younger brothers, flew back to my mother's home country for the funeral. Unfortunately, I could not go as I've only recently started a new job. I wasn't close to my grandfather, so I wasn't upset about staying behind. My family was gone for 22 days, and we FaceTimed and constantly communicated during their trip. I think it's great that my mom got to reconnect with family, and my brothers got to meet everyone. They returned last Wednesday and have been readjusting due to jet lag since then, understandably. My birthday was last Friday, 2 days after they got back. TBH, I wasn't expecting more than birthday wishes from everyone, but the day passed without a word from anyone. Was I annoyed? Sure. But I wasn't too upset. I'm not the biggest birthday person. I had a nice birthday dinner with my boyfriend and a few friends. All hell broke loose Saturday afternoon when I got a really angry phone call from my dad. My boyfriend did a special post for me, and my brother saw it and showed it to my parents. I had no idea he did this, as he isn't a big poster. Anyway, I could hear my mom crying in the background while my dad laid into me, saying that they were sorry they forgot, but not saying anything and then posting about it online was passive-aggressive and mean. I told him I wasn't upset and didn't think a 33rd birthday was a big deal. He said a few more things before abruptly ending the call. I didn't hear from my family for the rest of the weekend. Today, Monday, I woke up to a bunch of notifications. My mom posted on Facebook about ungrateful kids and how I tagged and ruined their surprise party for me. My extended family seemed to agree that I was a jerk. I tried calling my mom, but she didn't answer, so I posted my reply and said, "You guys forgot, and no one wished me a happy birthday unless you count Dad calling and yelling at me. My parents have been calling all morning, but I don't want to take their calls yet." Ida? Update. My boyfriend's post. He had no idea that my parents hadn't acknowledged my birthday until my dad called. I never mentioned it because, again, I wasn't angry. The post was just a picture of us with my birthday cheesecake at the restaurant. The caption verbatim was, "Blessed to see you make another trip around the sun. I love you." Nothing was mentioned. I also wasn't aware of the post until my dad called about it. This is out of character for either of my parents, so I won't go no contact. The way everything escalated is bizarre, but it gives me a better understanding of the situation. On to the update. After everything that happened yesterday, I told my boyfriend about the FB thing, and he agreed that I should not deal with it for the day. I turned my phone off and just chilled out. Around 6 p.m., my boyfriend got a text from my brothers asking if they could come by because they wanted to see me and bring me the candy they had brought back. I agreed, and they came over. Along with my parents. At this point, I was annoyed to see my parents, but we let everyone in. My boyfriend ensured I was all right and took my brothers back so I could be alone with my parents. My mom started crying immediately and sobbed out, "I'm sorry. I don't know about you, but seeing my mom cry started to make me cry." My dad then explained what happened. They forgot about my birthday. Again, understandable. My paternal aunt had come over on Saturday to see my parents. It's worth noting that she does not like my mom for whatever reason. Since he's been around for last 4 years, my boyfriend follows my brothers and a few of my cousins and vice versa. My cousins saw the post, showed my aunt, and she asked my mom how my birthday went. Side note, my extended family did reach out to wish me a happy birthday, they just didn't know my family forgot. My mom was caught out, and my aunt went in on her being a bad mother and saying at least I have my boyfriend. My dad got upset, told my aunt to leave, and said they already had something planned. They didn't. That's when he called me. They never saw the post, and I was wrong, thinking my brothers showed them. My dad said he felt awful for yelling at me and apologized, but explained that he hated seeing his wife so upset. They took the weekend to cool down, but as many of you guessed, my mom tried to save face via FB. She said she didn't think I would see it since I'm not usually on. She didn't realize that when she typed my name in the post, my username populated, thus tagging me. She was shocked and embarrassed when I responded and started getting calls and texts from the extended family. She told my dad about it, and they tried calling, but I wouldn't answer. My mom looked very troubled, and I just told her that everything was okay and that I was sorry I responded the way I did. It's evident that she's taking her father's passing extremely hard, and I don't want to pile more onto her. Now's not the time. My dad said it was a few days late, but he'd love to order pizza and hang out. I agreed. My boyfriend and brothers came inside, and we spent a few hours listening to stories about my grandfather and my mom's childhood. It's a birthday I won't forget, but I guess all's well that ends. I would like to point out that we do not like my dad's sister. She's awful, but my cousins are amazing, so my dad tolerates her. My mom can usually handle herself around my aunt, but she's vulnerable, which is how this escalated. I'll probably talk to her about it again, but not soon. Also, thank you for the birthday wish.
Tired of love, but crave it too. Let me start by first saying that I am. I own my house, my car, my business, yaddy yaddy. Not important, just basic normal people stuff. I'm not just a guy looking for a free ride. That's what I'm trying to say. I also have borderline personality disorder, BPD. It would take a whole essay to explain, so if you are curious, look it up. I've dealt with abandonment issues for as long as I can remember. I'm aware of this and I tend to bottle it up, rather than express it. This comes from me constantly asking people if they are okay. I do this because I'm constantly trying to reassure myself that I'm not doing anything wrong. The thing that really messes with me is, I truthfully believe I am doing the best I can, but I'm always left alone. No answers to any questions on why. Just a simple I don't want this anymore. I've tried everything from being affectionate, to giving space, to using money as a resolve, to even forgiving, no matter the circumstances. I have allowed myself to be used and walked on by every woman I've dated. Just so I can feel some sort of love. It's like no matter what I do, I can't get anyone to stay. I want a family life. I want to have someone to come home to every day. I crave these things in my being. Yet, I'm sick of being hurt at every turn. To clarify, BPD basically enhances all your emotions times 100. So just feeling sad to me is like a weight of depression. It's not like bipolar where it just suddenly shifts. It is just amplified when you feel it. What you feel is felt within your entire soul. So I'm like set on not having another relationship, but I'm lonely. Not like I can't live alone, because I can, but like I want to spend time with someone. The years have changed me, and I no longer like who I am. I'm just curious if I am alone in this feeling. Like, does anyone else relate to this? If so, has anyone found anything that helps? I am aware there are no meds to cure BPD. I'm only looking for some sort of outlet. My anger can be bad, when it comes, but I've found my resolve for anger. Just looking for anything to help.
How did you find out your significant other was cheating on you? Dated for 2 years until one day, out of the blue she says she's not happy anymore and breaks up with me. It sucked, but I figured it was for the best if she wasn't happy. About a week after we had broken up I saw her at the bar with some guy who she sheepishly admitted she was on a date with. Later that night I end up standing next to him ordering drinks. He apologized to me for the awkwardness. Yeah, it's just weird since we've only been broken up for a few days and she's already dating. He pauses. A few days? She and I have been seeing each other for like 3 months now. We stared at each other for a second. And then my ex comes running up to pull him away from me. He shrugged her off and told her to go F herself and then left the bar. That's how I found out my ex had been cheating on me for 3 months before apparently guilt took hold and she broke up with me. I bumped into the guy a few months later and talked about it. He thought she was just really flaky, but after speaking to me it just all clicked for him. We recalled the times when he couldn't reach her because she was with me and vice versa. I'm happily married now and she had to move home to live with her mom.
I have my friends with benefits old man juices stored in my drawer. We made love a month ago or so after a date of sorts. We have monthly encounters or every other week, but we did it in my car this time because, well, it just happened, I guess. I told him he could wrap a tissue around the used protection, and that I would dispose of it later, since we didn't want to throw it out the window and litter the place, so he did. He tied it shut and wrapped it on some tissue paper I had lying around. I drove him home, and he said, smirking, well, don't forget to throw this out. You don't want the coworker I ride share with to find it fermenting here when you drive her to work tomorrow. We laughed and he got out of the car. As I drove home, I looked at the passenger seat where the messy, scrunched up remains of the night were placed. I don't know, maybe I'm developing feelings for this man. Friendship with benefits often ends up with one of the parties falling for the other after a while, I suppose. Anyways, I reached home and picked it up from the seat to throw it out in the nearby bin, but maybe looking for my keys in a messy tote bag distracted me. I forgot I was holding it, and entered my flat with it. I went to the kitchen to dispose of it, but couldn't. I looked at it. It really wasn't anything I hadn't seen before. We've been making love for years now, but I couldn't throw it away. I stuffed it in a plastic bag and placed it in a drawer in my room. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I did. Morning came, and I opened the drawer and there it was. I smiled for some reason, so I kept it there for a whole month now. It's all kinds of brown and I dread just imagining how it must smell. I'm borderline insane for this. I couldn't imagine telling this to another soul. I mean, who keeps man juices as a souvenir? Can't bring myself to throw it away now, for some weird reason. I'm curious about the psychology behind a behavior such as this one. We've made love a few more times since, but it feels so strange. If he knew what I did, he would probably freak out. Now, I've been asking him to finish on me. Every time he does, my mind wanders off and the freaking brown fungus-infested baggie permeates my thoughts, kind of a turn-off. So, that's the story of why I have moldy man juices in my sock drawer.
My boyfriend complains about and criticizes everything. My boyfriend, 22M, and I, 23F, have been in a long-distance relationship for nearly 6 years. We met when we were young, and although it's been challenging, we plan to close the distance in a year after I finish school. Currently, we both have jobs. He works as a developer from home, technically full-time, but he puts in around 15 to 20 hours a week. I have a full-time office job and occasionally work at a restaurant after work and on weekends. As a bit of background, I'm very artistic, struggle with math, and tend to be more emotionally and socially intelligent. On the other hand, my boyfriend is highly intelligent academically, loves learning, and enjoys discussing a wide range of topics, from languages to food, space, and even snails. He is a type A personality, while I am more laid back as a type B. Despite our differences, we connect through our shared love for video games, which we often play together after work. However, recently he has been complaining a lot, especially about the game Valorant, which we've been playing intensively. It's mind-boggling how much he complains about every aspect of the game, from minor things like disliking the loading screen's design or colors to major issues like not finding it acceptable for players over 18 to be unemployed. He complains constantly. It happens every single time something occurs in the game. Even if the enemy team makes a simple mistake, he will complain about their intelligence or their right to play the game. I've asked him numerous times to stop, but the complaints persist. To be fair, I also have my moments of frustration in competitive games, but it's within a reasonable limit without ruining everyone's experience. Unfortunately, His complaints extend beyond gaming and affect other aspects of our conversations. He complains about driving cars or how monolingual individuals don't make an effort to learn new languages in their free time. Our conversations, which used to be enjoyable, have now turned into tedious discussions filled with criticism and complaints. Despite my pleas for him to stop and just talk about our days or something lighthearted, it continues. He has always had a tendency to express his dissatisfaction, but it was never unbearable. I believe his current job, which he started about 6 months ago, has left him extremely bored. Video games are no longer a way to unwind after a challenging workday but have become something he does whenever he has free time, similar to his previous jobs where he frequently switched due to boredom. I love him deeply, and I'm not willing to end the relationship because of this, but I needed to vent and perhaps seek advice on how to handle the situation. Bottling it up has become increasingly difficult, and I hope to find a resolution.
My mother-in-law spilled hot coffee on me for not wanting to name my baby after her dead husband. I am pregnant with my fiancé's first child. We've chosen to keep the gender a secret and just buy clothes we think are cute. It's been so much fun, but 3 days ago it kinda changed. I was with my mother-in-law and she was asking us about baby names. She suggested a few: Theodore, Jackson, Lars, and her persistent favorite Jerson. I was confused when I heard it, but apparently it was her late husband's name. He died when my fiancé was 5 of an overdose, so she suggested we call him that. I responded, what if it's a girl, and no offense but that name is really uncommon and very special. It kind of came out wrong but she started getting snarky with me saying, it's a boy. I can tell. She then rubbed my stomach, without consent, also with her knowing I'm sensitive to touch due to autism. I brushed her hand away and suggested how about Sean? She showed the most disgusted face and said, no. We need an American name. Not Irish. You're not Irish anymore, you're American. I looked at her dumbfounded. I was literally born and raised in Cork before moving at 19. She knows this. But I tried to suggest another to move on. How about Asha? She looked at me disgustedly. My baby is a boy. A boy, she yelled louder. I tried to calm her down. Okay, how about Leo? That apparently was her breaking point. That's when it happened. She took the cup of coffee she had and threw it at me. It was hot. Hot, I tell you. I quickly got up and left immediately. I didn't want to stay there any longer. I just stopped by McDonald's to clean myself up. I drove home after that and told my husband. He was shocked and immediately went to tell his mother off. And of course this is where the crocodile tears come. She threatened me. She said I'd never be able to meet my grandbaby if I didn't butt out and let her pick the name after I suggested your father's name, she cried. My husband is unsure of who to believe. He said that even if I was telling the truth, I shouldn't have riled her up, that her husband was the love of her life, and it would mean so much to her if we named our baby after him. He's sleeping on the couch from now on. Am I being too harsh? My husband's Alabama-loving niece tried to sleep with him. My husband, 48, and I, 42, have been together for 6 years, married for just over 3. His niece Donna is 22-23-ish. She's had issues with family loving in the past. Not long after hubby and I started dating, it came out that Donna had been having intimacy with her cousin on a regular basis. According to both the cousin and Donna, she was the instigator. She was also unapologetic. Donna moved in with her girlfriend this past spring and had been having difficulty holding down a job. She has mild Tourette syndrome and doesn't take medication for it. She texted hubby over the summer and asked if we wanted our house cleaned. We talked about it. We've both been uncomfortable around her in the past, but we did want to help her out. So we said okay, and she's been coming over twice a week to clean. Takes her a couple of hours each time, and we pay her $60 a week. She came over this past Saturday to clean. When she showed up, she was wearing a tiny bikini top and booty shorts. I thought it was odd because that's not close to anything she normally wears, but I thought maybe she was going to the lake after or something. We live in Texas and it's still quite warm here. I wanted her to put some clothes on but I didn't want to seem judgmental. I was in our office doing my weekly receipt checks. I'm self-employed, when I heard hubby say, "What do you think you're doing?" Then I heard Donna say in a sing-song voice, "But I'm tired." And my husband said, "There's a couch if you're tired. Knock it off." A few seconds later, I heard hubby yell. I said stop. Then I heard a thud. I got up and ran to the living room. My husband stood beside his recliner, and Donna was sprawled on the floor. I asked what happened, and Donna told me she was just playing. My husband told her to get out. She got up, looked at us both, then said, "Fine." Like a 5-year-old and stomped out. After she left, hubby told me he had been sitting in his recliner with his foot up. Donna had come in and straddled the foot of the recliner, which is when he asked what she was doing. He said after he told her to knock it off, she started smiling at him and was leaning towards him while rubbing on his legs and wiggling her butt around. The sound I heard was her falling on the floor when he pushed the foot back into place and stood up. I was pissed, still am, but I didn't want to get into it with Donna. She thrives on drama. I sent her pay for the week, then texted her and told her she would no longer be cleaning our house and she was no longer welcome here. She sent both hubby and I a couple of texts that she was sorry and just having some fun, but we ignored them. She showed up at the house Tuesday. That's her normal day to clean. When I answered the door, I just looked at her and said, "What the hell do you think you're doing here?" She goes, "I'm here to clean," and I told her, "No, you're not. Go home." And I shut the door in her face. I told her don't ever come back again unless she wants to be pounded by a family member in a different way. She whined and yelled things through the door for a few minutes, but eventually left. All evening and into the night I've been fielding texts and calls from her parents and my mother-in-law. They're all asking why I fired Donna, and don't I know she needs the money and she has problems and I need to be more helpful. I finally told them the truth, which got her parents off my back but not mother-in-law because family. Hubby has told her to leave me alone. She's been complaining at me all night that I need to be more understanding and give Donna another chance. I really want to stand my ground about this, but I'm so tired of never doing anything right with his family. Hubby doesn't want her around either, but he's wavering because mother-in-law is throwing fits at him too.
What hobby says he probably doesn't have a girlfriend? I don't think you can emphasize the probably part of this enough. My best buddy is into some. Well, I don't want to sound mean, but some dorky stuff. Model airplanes. He's brought me to play D&D at the comic book store down the street from him a few times. Motherfucker collects old sci-fi VHS tapes. Action figures. Anime. You get it. But this dude slays when it comes to women. I haven't been single for a long time, and he is my only single friend that makes me even slightly jealous. He's a decent looking dude. Not like a movie star or model or anything crazy. But he exudes such an odd brand of confidence and self-assurance that women love him. He always has something to talk about. Is always meeting new people. And when he tells women about his hobbies, he talks about them with such passion and joy that I really do think it helps him seal the deal. He's single by choice. He could get laid in 5 texts. And I'm positive he's just waiting for the right girl who shares similar hobbies. I guess what I'm getting at is don't act like dorky hobbies are the reason nobody wants to go out with you. Doctors of Reddit, when were you happy that a patient didn't follow your advice? One of the most obese patients I've ever seen in my career as a physician was recently admitted to my clinic. He begged me to treat his stomach pain because most doctors would take one good look at him and essentially say that all he needed to do was lay off the McChickens. Another doctor diagnosed him with diabetes without running any tests and gave him medication for it. But the patient didn't have diabetes, so his blood sugar levels dropped dangerously low. When he went back to tell his doctor what happened, the doctor just said, "Look at you, you obviously have diabetes," and discharged him. Instead of turning him away, I ran a thorough exam to find out what the problem in his stomach was. When the results came back, I found out he was at risk of fatty liver disease. It's often hard to catch because it's a silent K-year, but symptoms like fatigue, abdominal pain, and brain fog are signs that you're at risk of fatty liver. When I told my patient this, he said that he had been experiencing all of those symptoms for months, but he never knew why. I was grateful that I was able to notice he was at risk before it progressed too far. If it had led to scarring of the liver known as cirrhosis, it would have been too late to save him. I've lost 10% of my patients this way, but luckily there's an easy way to tell if you're at risk of fatty liver disease. You just have to measure the circumference around your waist in inches, right at the level of your belly button. If that measurement is more than half of your height, you're at risk of having a fatty liver. A ratio of 0.4 is best, while a 0.5 puts you at risk. I was very worried about my patient because over the past 5 years, there's been an increase in people with a ratio higher than 0.5, and he was one of them. As of right now, 25% of Americans have a fatty liver, and that's because when our diets get worse, excess fat builds in our livers. I was terrified that my patient would also contribute to that statistic because of his condition. Though, I never could have guessed that he would change how I treated fatty liver from then on. At the time, I was just concerned for his health because the only medication I knew to prescribe was basically useless. So, I told him that the only real way to reverse fatty liver was for him to change his lifestyle. I always tell this to my patients, but I'm always met with the same defiance because of how hard they think it is to change their lifestyle. You may think it's easy, but how would you feel if you were told that you can't eat fast food anymore? Not so happy, right? Well, almost all of my patients feel the same way, which is why their livers end up in critical condition. So I prescribed my patient with medication, and warned him that if he didn't adapt to a healthier lifestyle, I would be seeing him again in a coffin. Ironically, the best way I learned to treat fatty liver disease came from this patient. 3 months passed, and my patient did end up coming back. To say I was relieved was an understatement. Right away, I noticed that he had lost some weight and seemed energetic, which was a significant improvement from his previous depressed state. I wondered if he had effectively changed his lifestyle, or if by some miracle the medication I had prescribed him worked. He told me that the pain in his stomach had subsided, and that he was going on daily walks because his brain fog and fatigue weren't an issue anymore. I asked him if he had changed his diet like I suggested, and he said that he had. He said that since he lost some weight, his body wasn't calling out for processed foods anymore, so he was eating cleaner. 3 months ago, I was anxious that he would develop cirrhosis and afraid that he wouldn't live much longer, but I was happy I could finally put those negative thoughts to rest, because my patient was on the right track to a healthy liver. I congratulated him on his results and told him I was pleased the medication had actually been useful for him. That's when he revealed something that made my jaw drop. He said he had never gone to pick up his prescription, because he was taking an everyday liver vitamin every morning instead, and it was the only real reason he was able to change his diet in the first place. I admitted that I had never come across that medication before. So, he told me that he found out about the vitamin because of an article, saying an extract blend of bergamot citrus and cinnamon leaf could regress the progression of fatty liver. That's why he decided to try that out instead. He then left me stumped when he confirmed that most of the results I saw from him today were because of the everyday liver vitamin. That explained why I had never seen this kind of result in a patient with a fatty liver, especially not in 3 months. Later that day, I researched the main ingredients in the everyday liver vitamin, and was impressed that my patient had found this because the extract blend he was talking about was patented Bergasin FF. Bergasin FF has studies stating that it reduces the fat in the liver, fights the damaged tissue cells in the liver that lead to cirrhosis, and reduces chronic inflammation in the liver. If you have some time, I would recommend looking into these studies, because there's so much more information about how Bergasin FF has the ability to help reduce liver fat and body weight, especially since not even the medication I prescribed him had Bergasin FF, or even studies as promising as that ingredient. This is because the everyday liver vitamin is the only supplement on the market with this ingredient, along with 15 other ingredients that studies show are good for the liver. Since then, I've been vouching for the everyday liver vitamin to my patients with fatty liver, hoping they could make the same recovery he had. We should all be taking something like this, because we aren't going to stop consuming processed foods anytime soon, so might as well prevent this liver disease in the future. And I was glad I didn't send this patient away because I also looked at him and thought he was diabetic. What is the craziest transformation from someone at your high school? It was when I was a teenager. I was a short, kinda fat, nerdy kid with acne, braces, and long, greasy hair like Kurt Cobain. For some fucking reason I cannot, as an adult, fathom, I decided I wanted a perm to look like Gavin Rossdale, except I was still a kinda fat kid with a kinda fat face, so I just looked like a fat kid with shitty, dirty, curly hair. It was fucking terrible. Now, before you hit reply and bang out the same bullshit that I hear all the time when I tell this story, everyone goes through an ugly duckling phase, you're no different, hear me out. I was not your average ugly duckling turned swan. I was a 1/10. I was fucking hideous. Like, girls wouldn't audibly say ew if I so much as smiled at them, sometimes if I just made eye contact. It was debilitating for my fragile teenage psyche, and extremely humiliating and emasculating. I couldn't even get my friend girls to hook me up with any of their friends. My teenage personality didn't help anything. I was one of those attention-seeking loud kids who made horrible jokes and hoped people would laugh with me instead of at me for once. Seriously, I was a fucking greasy, pimply, fat, loudmouthed little troglodyte. That was my life for 3 years, from age 12 through age 15, a social outcast, a dweeb, a dork, a loser, throw all of them at me cause there ain't nothing new. When I started my first semester of my sophomore year in high school, I was taking Smart Kid Trig. There was a jock in my class, a kid named Jay, who wasn't really smart enough to be in the Smart Kid classes, but was probably too smart for the regular classes, so here he was, struggling along with things I found easier than a tutorial level in video games. Through some twist of fate or good fortune, or most likely because our last names start with the same first 2 letters, Jay sat behind me in that Trig class. Jay wasn't above cheating, and I wasn't above whoring out my brains for a pretend a friend, so we got along like cupcakes and frosting. About a month into the semester, Jay asked me, hey, optical delusions, you ever had a girlfriend? Up until this point, Jay and I had never talked about anything other than how awesome he was at everything, which was really more Jay talking and me nodding along, or Trig. I didn't really know how to respond. I mean, I obviously hadn't had a girlfriend, but that's not the kind of information you let out easily when you're on the bottom tier of the high school food chain. And no, girls don't really like me. I squeaked out, trying to keep my normally loud voice hushed to a whisper without cracking. Puberty is the fucking worst, dude. When do you get those braces off? Jay was staring at my face, judging every crack, every pockmark, every pimple, everything. I could feel it, but it didn't feel the same as when the pretty girls would do it. He wasn't reeling in horror for starters, and he seemed to be inspecting me instead of rejecting me. In about a month, but then I have to get retainers, and depending on how my palate expander worked I may knee stop. Dude, don't talk about your braces and shit, no one cares. I never did know when to shut up. Oh right, ha 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 ha, sorry Jay. My already red from the acne and topical creams face turning a shade of beet. I was overcompensating for oversharing. I was really awkward. Can you get a ride home an hour after school ends? His inquiry seemed earnest, and didn't feel like he was going to tie me to the flagpole or give me an atomic wedgie. It felt like he wanted to help. I probably can. Yeah, why? Come to the weight room with me after school. Football team does weight training and we're allowed to bring in one underclassman outsider to try out for a couple weeks. If you make it, you can try out for the squad next year. I don't know how to work out. Jay, the forced grin had disappeared from my face, replaced by a half frown of dejection. Knowing full well that I could barely lift myself up on the chin-up bar more than twice, I wasn't going to fare well in the weight room with kids twice my size. Don't worry dude, I got you. And he slapped me on the back hard enough to half knock the wind out of me. I smiled at him, not forced this time, it felt real. All of it felt real. Over the next year, I got the braces off, cut my shitty hair, and hit the gym so fucking hard that I went from 150 pounds of squishy preteen flub to 165 pounds of rock fucking solid muscle and under 10% body fat or some shit. The jocks started giving me high fives in the halls. I was dubbed the leprechaun. My sister and best friend effed each other and now it's my fault. I am 26 and my older sister Julie is 28. Julie is married to Tanner, 29, and they have 2 kids that are 6 years and 5 months old. I have been best friends with Kyle, 26, since we were in diapers. Kyle is engaged to Kathy, 28, and has a wedding date set in November. Kathy and Julie went to high school together and have been close friends for years. Kyle and I both work at a gym that Tanner owns. We all live in a town with less than 2,000 people that live here. 2 weeks ago I was out with Tanner getting lunch before heading back to work, when Tanner started to swear while looking at his phone. He showed me the phone and while looking on his baby camera app, Tanner saw Julie and Kyle kissing and getting intimate. Tanner started yelling at me asking if I knew about it, where I was in shock and told him no. Tanner started taking screenshots of the images and said he was going home for the day. That night he ended up confronting his wife, my sister, Julie. She admitted to having an affair with Kyle, my best friend, for months. Kathy was out of town that night but Tanner called her to tell her what was going on. Kathy came back the next day and immediately called off the wedding and kicked Kyle out of the house. Tanner took the same route and also asked Julie to leave the house so he could think over how to go about separating while also keeping the children in mind. A few days later Julie and Kyle decided to move out of our town into a town 20 minutes away and rent an apartment together. 2 days ago I helped to move them in and I'm getting a lot of heat from Tanner and Kathy. Kyle is my best friend and Julie is my sister and I know what they did was wrong but I also know that they don't have a lot of support at the moment and they are both family to me. This takes us to today. Tanner is now telling me I am not allowed to see my niece and nephew since I decided cheaters are more important than him. I also lost my job today, where Tanner was my boss. I am stuck in the middle where my best friend and sister were the ones who had the affair but Kathy has become like family as well as Tanner and my niece and nephew. I am stuck in the middle of the family drama as I am the single one of our now broken friend group of 5.
My impatient husband is excited about buying our own house, but because of my carelessness, we could lose money and face disapproval. My husband and I have been trying to buy our first house for over a year. It's been insane in this market and we finally found a place that isn't exactly what we wanted, and was $40,000 over the asking price. But still, it meant we would no longer be paying rent and was only a little over our budget. We were supposed to close on Monday. I was so excited I wanted to get a new outfit for the closing. While shopping I saw a bag I fell in love with and it matched my new outfit perfectly. They did a great job selling me and before I knew it, I had let the sales ladies convince me that as a new homeowner, I deserved nice things. They also talked me into getting a store credit card with a $20K limit. The bag cost a pretty big chunk of that. I was approved and bought the bag. What I did not know is that taking out a new credit card is really bad when you are buying a house. We couldn't close on Monday, and since there are like a dozen offers on this house we may lose it while everything is sorted out with our lenders. Also, we may lose the $10,000 in earnest cash we gave the seller. I want to throw up. I know I messed up so badly. It was a stupid decision and I was such an idiot for even walking into the store. And this bag maybe ended up costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars in earnest money, and still having to rent, as my husband has told me countless times over the past 4 days. Thankfully, the seller is going to give us 5 business days to get financing worked out with the lender. The realtor thinks it can be done. The crisis is averted. It looks like we will get the house still. Apparently, the sale did go through. My husband and I were able to finally close on our first house last Friday. It came with a very nice pool that I was excited about. My husband had to travel for work immediately after the closing, so it was up to me to arrange keys, initial move-in, utilities, and services. On Saturday morning we were talking and he said, "You know the drought is worse here in California. I know it's too late now, but I'm wondering if we get this bad if it wasn't a huge mistake to get a house with a pool." I said I was still excited about the pool and is already laid out by it and gone swimming. He said that he was just thinking out loud about the future. The more I thought about it, the more I thought maybe he was right, so I researched how to drain pools, looked up YouTube videos and went and rented a pump and I drained all the water. The pool is now basically empty. Well, he freaked out when he got home and said that I made a huge mistake because you can't leave a pool drained. I said I did it to make him happy, and that I understood his concerns. He said that he's so sick of me acting like a child, that he's going to hire a babysitter for me while he goes away. Obviously, this really hurt my feelings. I'm a nurse for God's sake, not a bumbling fool. I keep trying to explain my point and that I did it to make him happy, and he says that if I don't, I understand why he's upset and don't get how foolish I was. He can't waste brain power on it. After a few days of tension and silence, we finally sat down for a heart-to-heart talk. I told him how much his words had hurt me and how I felt like he didn't appreciate my efforts. He apologized for his harsh words and admitted that he had overreacted because he was stressed about the house and his work trip. He explained that the pool situation was more complicated than he realized, and he appreciated that I was trying to help. We agreed to communicate better and to make decisions together, especially when it comes to the house. He also promised to be more patient and understanding, recognizing that we are both learning as we navigate this new chapter in our lives. We decided to hire a professional to refill and properly maintain the pool. We celebrated our new home with a small gathering of friends and family.
Am I the a-hole for throwing my friend's girlfriend out? I, 35F, have been friends with Alex and Adam, twins 35M, since our moms were pregnant with us. Literally grew up together, including them being only 3 days older than I am. Alex got engaged several months ago and the wedding is the weekend before Halloween. I love his fiancée, Kelly, 30F, she's a beautiful human. Adam started dating a girl a few weeks ago, Jordan, 28F. Jordan is the definition of spoiled brat. Only child who has never been told no and quite obnoxious about daddy's money. Alex and Kelly have their wedding planned already and are just waiting for the day to arrive. Ever since Jordan came into the picture, she's been trying to insert herself into the wedding. I'm currently 6 months pregnant with my third and final kid. My other 2 littles will be ring bearers and my husband and I are both in the wedding party. Jordan has apparently pulled Kelly aside more than a few times asking to replace me as a bridesmaid so I don't ruin the aesthetic of the wedding. Kelly declines every time because we're basically family at this point. Kelly has told me each time she's done this and spoken to both Alex and Adam. Alex as her fiancé has taken her side, but Adam is staying neutral at best, avoidant at worst. My husband and I had both couples over last night for a chill dinner. Jordan immediately upon seeing said I look like a beached whale. So 6 months pregnant, not exactly small but I'm size 6 when not pregnant. I was livid. I told her at some point my belly would go away but she was stuck with her ugly personality and kicked her out of my house. Kelly, Alex and my husband all think I was within my right to throw her out, even if what I said wasn't exactly nice. Jordan did some more name calling and yelling before dragging Adam by the arm out of the house. I told him he could stay if he wanted and she called me a boyfriend stealing beach. Doesn't make sense but okay. Today Adam texted me saying I took a low blow and needed to apologize for being as a whole to Jordan. I don't feel like apologizing, but I'm curious, was I out of line? We told my grandma I'm pregnant. Then she passed away in her sleep. I'm around 8 weeks with my husband and I's first. We aren't telling anyone until after the first trimester, though we did tell my mom when we found out since she is like my best friend. My grandma has a degenerative disease and for the past year or so it's been really bad. She can no longer move on her own, use the restroom by herself, talk, eat, drink, or see, and she is on 24/7 hospice care at her home. All this to say, we have been waiting on her to pass for the last year, but it's just been dragging on. Last week, we got the news that her kidneys were beginning to shut down. My mom and family have been going to visit with her and say their goodbyes. Unfortunately I live on the other side of the country, and my doctor recommended against flying back due to the stress of the environment on my still early pregnancy. So I gave my mom permission to tell her about the baby, at her discretion. I know it's kind of odd for the situation, but I thought it might give my grandma a silver lining through a hard time. My mom originally said she couldn't, because everyone was over and she couldn't tell her without our whole family overhearing. But yesterday my mom called me, and said she had gotten some alone time in her room and whispered it to her. She said she got this little smile, which is a really big deal for her condition, and it was a sweet moment. My mom called me again this morning, as I was puking from morning sickness. Turns out my grandma passed away peacefully in her sleep last night. And it's bittersweet. And it has me so emotional, because we have been expecting her to pass for a year now. She herself has been expecting to pass for a year now. And yet she passes away the night after we tell her she's going to be a great grandma. It hurts she will never get to meet them, but I know from that smile she felt love for them, and although I couldn't be there, I feel like I gave her the best farewell I could. I hope she thought so, too.
Now that I moved away for university, I can finally let my fingernails grow. I have a sister who bites her nails. She has been doing it since she was little. No matter what anyone tries, she won't stop. My parents didn't want her to feel bad about it, so every Monday, Wednesday and Friday night for practically my entire life my mom would file my nails so the white part was gone and they were as short as she could make them without hurting me. She did the same thing for herself and my dad too. My sister got picked on for biting her nails until all her fingers were bloody, and so my parents got the school to agree that she could spend recess and lunch inside one of the classrooms. Since they did not want her to be lonely, I had to be in the classroom with her and I wasn't allowed to spend recess or lunch with the other kids. If I got invited to a birthday party or over to another kid's house, I was not allowed to go unless my sister could go too, because she didn't have any friends of her own. So I got bullied too, and pretty soon no one invited me over. I did not have any friends at school or in our neighborhood. High school was worse. Besides biting her fingernails until they were bloody, my sister would take off her socks and shoes and bite her toenails too. It doesn't matter if she was at school sitting at her desk, or we were at a restaurant or in church or anywhere else. She would do it right then and there. If anyone tries to stop her from biting either fingernails or toenails, she would cry or struggle with them. My parents used to put nail polish on her that tasted bad so she would not bite her nails, but that did not stop it. To make her feel less alone, my parents would wear it and forced me to as well. I don't even like wearing nail polish on my nails, but it didn't matter. Last year when I used my allowance to buy press-on French manicure nails from the store because I wanted to have pretty nails, my sister found out and told my parents, and they made me say sorry too. Her and grounded me for a month. I turned 18 last month and I moved into my dorm at university the next day. I haven't talked to my parents since I moved because they are against me coming here. They wanted me to live at home while I went to school. If my parents could have legally forced me not to move, they would have. They are mad that I am abandoning my sister and our family even though I don't ever want to see her again. Now that I don't live there, I am letting my nails grow. It has been 12 days now. My roommate even filed them into a nice shape for me.
Today I messed up by making out with a girl. Met a girl at the casino last night, super cute, tall, great shape, the whole thing. I work in the gaming industry in Vegas, so I show her how to play blackjack and roulette. I put my hand on her back and hold hands with her and it's going well, and this is a big deal for me. I've never been a ladies' man, so, well, heck, I'm just happy I'm not sitting at the bar by myself in the corner. When she wants to bounce, we leave and make out a little bit on the way to her car. When we get there, her free spirit crawls up on the top to lay down and look at the stars. She invites me up and the whole thing is super romantic and flirty, and even though I'm looking up at the heavens, I feel like I'm in them. Well, at least for the half second before the glass roof of her Tesla. My golden child brother proposed to my fiancé. Then my mom hit my fiancé and said she regret having me. We decided to report her to police and block her. Mark was my mom's baby boy and she didn't do much to try and hide it. They didn't spend much time with my sisters and I, like normal parents did with their kids unless they had to, but they'd spend time with Mark as often as possible, like taking him out shopping while we stayed with a sitter, or bringing him home his favorite food and toys from the store when they'd shop alone. He usually got better things compared to the rest of us, like new expensive clothes, while ours were thrifted or new toys just for him, compared to old toys we had to share with each other. If my sisters and I got gifts, they were for us to share, but my mom made it pretty clear that Mark's things were only for him and we shouldn't touch it. When Mark would screw up, I'd get punished for not being a good role model and showing him the proper way to behave. For example, Mark went through a phase of breaking his toys and I got the beating because obviously he learned the behavior from me. When he was 8, Mark got in trouble at school for trying to push a kid down the stairs. I was grounded for 2 weeks and told to apologize to the kid for not teaching my brother right. When I turned 13, I pushed for my parents to start giving me an allowance. They agreed as long as I did household chores like mowing the lawn, taking out the trash, and raking leaves. It was usually somewhere around $25 a week to help me start saving. Mark saw that I was getting money and he begged my parents for an allowance too. Instead of making him work, $10 of my allowance money was given to him each week because we were doing such a good job with our chores. Whenever I asked him to help, he'd tell me it's not his job to do chores, so why should he bother? It was around this time that I started really distancing myself from my brother. By the time I entered high school, we only talked to each other when we needed small favors or when we absolutely had to. I got my first job when I turned 17 because I wanted to finally get my own car and make money that they couldn't force me to give to Mark. My oldest sister Maggie helped me start my own bank account and showed me how to properly budget and save my money. I got my first car at 18 after all of my hard work. When Mark got his license, my parents asked me to let him use my car to get around and for extra practice behind the wheel. Reluctantly, I agreed and for a while the arrangement was fine. Mark used my car when I didn't need it and helped maintain it pretty well. When he expressed wanting my parents to buy him his own car, my mom came to me and told me to give him my car because he needed it more. When I refused, she threatened to kick me out. We got in a fight that night which ended with her giving Mark my car and taking me to transfer ownership of it to him within the following few days. Since I didn't have anywhere else I could go at the time, I just sucked it up and signed it over. When I graduated high school, both of my parents skipped my graduation because Mark didn't want to sit in a long ceremony just to see me get a piece of paper, and my mom didn't want to leave him alone for the night. So I only had the support of my sisters, aunt, and uncle who wanted to take me out. They ended up having to bring me home at my parents' request because they made me dinner to make it up to me. It was a dinner I couldn't eat because my mom put shrimp and chicken on the same serving dish and I'm allergic to shellfish. At the start of the new school year I moved away from college and cut contact with them. Around the time I moved back, Charlotte told me they had been seeing a family therapist and my parents wanted to apologize for their treatment of us. I was hesitant but I agreed as long as they would be genuine, and the reconciliation process started when I moved back home. Then I met Jen. I wasn't sure where my relationship with her was going or where my relationship with my parents was going. I didn't want to mention my family at all. Mostly because I was ready to cut contact again if I needed to. At dinner with my family, my parents asked to see pictures of my girlfriend and they started passing my phone around the table. Mark saw it and blew up calling me a poop brother for dating his ex-girlfriend. He demanded I break it off with her. I refused. When I asked Jen about it, she confirmed they dated and gave me the details about their breakup. They dated back in August 2022. They were only together for a month before he broke things off with her because he was bored of being in a relationship and never really wanted to settle down anyway. At the time they were dating I was in a different state so I had no idea he even had a girlfriend and I had no idea who Jen was until I met her. Jen and I met at a bar when I moved back in October and hit it off really well. She was easily the most beautiful and intelligent woman I ever met and we met up a few times more before we made it official. It took a few weeks, but eventually Mark stopped bringing up me dating his ex and I thought he was over it. On Jen's birthday this year, I took her out to a fancy dinner with both of our families and her closest friends to ask her to marry me. Mark flipped once again and blew up about me proposing to her, which I and my sisters immediately shut down. Mark had been pretty quiet about the whole thing for the last 2 months. I didn't see him much and figured he was in low contact with me, which I had no problem with. Then he invited me and Jen for family dinner at his apartment with my parents and sisters. I thought it was weird but my parents and sisters were also going so we agreed to go. The dinner was nice, nothing too fancy, and we moved to the living room to talk. About 30 minutes into normal conversation Mark stood up and told us he had an announcement. He made a long speech about being happy to have his family around for his big moment, then got on one knee and pulled out this cheap ring while asking Jen to marry him. Jen was confused and obviously uncomfortable. She demanded that he put it away and stand up. My dad tried to make a grab for Mark but I got to him first and punched him. He said something along the lines of wanting to show me that Jen wasn't really into me and just wanted to get back at him. We went home after that and the day after, I called Mark to ask him to meet up with me to talk. He agreed to talk to both of us and showed up at my place around noon. It was pretty quiet for a few minutes before I started the conversation. I apologized for not warning him I would be proposing to Jen, and I apologized for hitting him. He said whatever but he appreciated the apology. I told him what Jen had said about the relationship and breakup when I asked her about it and I asked him to confirm if it was true. I pretty much said that his reaction throughout the whole thing has been extreme and I wanted to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding their relationship or downplaying how serious they were. He confirmed that they only dated for a few weeks and he broke up with her because he lost interest. Jen asked if he was acting like this because he still had feelings or regrets about ending things with her. He said he could admit he thought she was more attractive than when he last saw her, but there weren't any feelings or regrets. He said he just didn't like seeing a girl he dated, even if it was short term, with his older brother, and as a man I shouldn't have violated him by pursuing things with his ex. I reminded him that I had no idea they dated so it wasn't like I consciously did this knowing their history together. He shrugged me off and said it didn't matter, I still should have broken it off. I asked him why he proposed to her if he didn't have any lingering feelings. Basically, to sum it up, he was talking about it to one of his buddies who was around when Mark and Jen dated. The guy put the idea in his head that maybe Jen knew from the start that we were related and was doing this to get back at him considering Jen had been hung up on him after they ended. He and his friend thought it would be a good idea to test it and see if they were right, so he came up with the idea to propose and see if she dumped me for him. Jen asked him to elaborate on why he thought she was hung up on him, and he told her that he heard she was asking about him following the breakup and still hanging out at the places they used to go to, so it was a valid assumption. Then for her to pop up randomly with his brother affirmed his suspicions. Jen told him she'd only asked about him once following the breakup and she'd been hanging out at those places with friends before they started dating and she wouldn't avoid them because of a breakup. She also told him she was offended at the idea that she would go as low as to pursue me, just to get back at him. He shrugged and gave her a half apology but said she had to see it from his point of view. He asked her if she really didn't know and she told him that she didn't see the resemblance in us until we were in the same room and we act nothing alike, so it never crossed her mind, and he said okay. That pretty much wrapped up the conversation. He did tell me before he left that I could take back his invite to the wedding because he can't bring himself to support our relationship knowing he used to date her. I told him he didn't have to worry about that as he was most likely going to be uninvited anyway. Update: my golden child brother proposed to my fiancée. Then my mom hit my fiancée and said she regret having me. We decided to report her to police and block her. My mom is now upset that Mark is uninvited for my wedding. It started with a comment made during my younger sister's engagement. We sat around talking about what she envisioned for her dream wedding. She talked a bit about wanting a destination wedding and her ideas for the cake and dress. Then she said something along the lines of, "Teddy, I know Mark's banned from your wedding, but you won't care if he comes to mine, right?" I laughed it off and told her I can't get mad about her guest list even if I wanted to. My mom gave me this weird look and asked if Mark was still not invited to my wedding. I told her yes and she got irritated. She told me she thought I was joking and said I was being unreasonable to go through with banning him from the wedding since he's family. She accused me of holding a grudge just to be petty. I reminded her that he and I agreed on him not coming. Sophie laid into my mom a bit about trying to make her special day about Mark and my mom dropped the issue. For those of you who might be wondering, Mark wasn't at Sophie's party because he apparently had to work and couldn't make it. A few days later, my mom stopped by my house and said she wanted to discuss my wedding. She asked me why I was so adamant about Mark not coming. She said that I shouldn't be so insecure about Mark and Jen's previous relationship and that uninviting him was a step too far. I told her that Mark and I mutually agreed on him not coming to the wedding and he can come to me about it himself if he has a problem with it. We got into an argument and she said that if I wasn't going to re-invite Mark then she would not be coming either because I'm ostracizing her son. I shrugged and told her if that's what she wants then she can toss her invite in the trash because I won't beg her to be there. She asked me if I would really be okay with her not attending and I told her it wouldn't be the first time she missed an event of mine because of Mark. She said I was being an off-for, throwing her past mistakes in her face, and she stormed out. My mom is uninvited from the wedding indefinitely. About 2 weeks after she decided to not come to the wedding, she stopped by and said she wanted to clear the air and talk about everything. We agreed and invited her in to join us for dinner. Jen made her a plate of food and I asked her if she was still planning on not coming to the wedding. She said that while she wants to, she can't get over me not inviting Mark because of a simple mistake. I reminded her that his simple mistake was proposing to my fiancé with me sitting less than 3 feet away from him and she said it was just a joke. Jen asked her why she wanted to talk if she was maintaining the same stance on Mark coming to the wedding. She said she wanted to talk to Jen and she was hoping Jen would hear her out and talk me into inviting Mark again. She apparently assumed I was at work and she'd be able to catch her alone. Jen politely told her that she understood her thought process but she wouldn't have had that conversation anyway without me present since this is about my brother. My mom made a comment somewhere in the lines of Jen being spineless and unable to have a conversation without me thinking for her, which started a pretty heated back and forth between the three of us before Jen told her to get out. She got up and started walking towards the door and my mom followed her, still screaming at her. By this point she's yelling about her tearing our family apart. While Jen was unlocking the front door, my mom grabbed her hair and pulled her to the ground still screaming. She hit her and tried to claw her face and I dragged her off of her and threw her outside. She banged on the door for a few minutes while I made sure Jen was okay before she left and called the both of us repeatedly. When I was sure Jen was okay I texted my mom and told her not to bother reaching out again because we'll never speak to her again. We filed a report with the police and were told that even though Jen doesn't want to pursue anything, it's not up to us to decide whether it goes further, but they would keep our preference in mind. We provided some pretty decent evidence of the assault, including pictures of Jen's face and texts with my mom and dad talking about what happened. We were advised to report and record any other incidents with my mom going further in case anything else happens. After that, I was shocked when my mom tried to corner me leaving my job and screamed at me about trying to ruin her life. She kept screaming that I was an awful son for trying to get her arrested over a small misunderstanding and she didn't understand what she'd done to deserve being punished like this. I told her that if she didn't like being in legal trouble then she shouldn't have hit Jen. She demanded I tell the police to forget the report, which I refused. I told her exactly what the officer said about it being out of my hands. She had a tantrum in the parking lot and hit me a few times before security intervened and dragged her off the property. I decided to call my dad after our talk and let him know I would be going no contact. He didn't answer the first time I called, so I left a message asking to have a long talk. When he called back, he asked if it was okay for my mom to be a part of the conversation. I told him it was okay since she needed to hear what I had to say too. The conversation went about as well as you could expect. I told them both that Jen and I are cutting them out of our lives. My dad demanded to know why I would do something like that after going through all the trouble of repairing our relationship. I told him that this entire thing with Mark has shown me that nothing is actually repaired between us and, as far as they're concerned, the world revolves around only my mom and my little brother. I told them that their continued favoritism of Mark has brought our relationship to a point of no return and that I wasn't interested in holding on to a failing relationship. I told them that I agreed to reconcile for my sister's sake, but I don't appreciate all of the disrespect towards me and Jen, and that I wouldn't put up with it anymore for both of our sakes. To my mom specifically, I told her that I was tired of her using me as a scapegoat for her bad parenting and Mark's attitude. I also told her that I would never forgive her for what she did to Jen and what she did to me and my sisters growing up. She started to say how I should move on like my sisters have, but I cut her off and told her that she should take their forgiveness and move on because she would never receive it from me, especially after everything she's done these last few weeks. She started crying and asking me how I could treat her like such a villain. I told her she could only be upset with herself because I've done nothing wrong. She cried harder and told me how much she regretted having me and how I've only tried to ruin her life. This started a heated argument between her and Jen once again, and Jen told her in much more colorful words that she was disgusting for saying something like that to me. I don't know if she left the room or just decided to shut up, but my mom stopped talking when Jen was done speaking to her.
My husband, male 34, has cancer and I, female 32, am gonna have to divorce him. This is the most effing heartbreaking situation. We have been together since college, we are only 32 and 34, our lives have just begun. He was diagnosed with cancer a year ago, and we are reaching the bankruptcy line with all the medical bills. We don't even know if my husband is going to survive. We went to a seminar for people in our situation and had a private meeting with the lawyer giving that seminar. He looked at our situation and told us that we should legally get divorced so that the debt won't break my back if my husband passes away and I don't lose everything. I love my husband, I love him so much. He says this is the best we can do. F this system.
Parents of Reddit, what is the creepiest thing your young child has ever said to you? I was tucking in my 2-year-old, he said goodbye dad, I said, no, we say good night, he said I know, but this time it's goodbye. Had to check on him a few times to make sure he was still there. My kid's Catholic school is over 100 years old. There is a basement under the gym that's used for storage. I was subbing once and during recess one of the kickballs goes down the stairs. A little girl was standing at the top of the stairs yelling just throw it up to me. I went over and asked who she was talking to and she replied that big man down the stairs. I went down and there was nobody down there and it was the only way in. I asked some of the other kids if they have seen the man before and they said yes, but sister told us not to talk to him. I asked them to describe sister and they described a nun and there haven't been nuns at the school in 40 years. Go back to sleep, there isn't anything under your bed. Has behind you now. Still haven't gotten over that one and shiver at the memory. Has a friend ever done said something that just straight up ended the friendship? What happened? After convincing me to delete my accounts everywhere and make new ones. After promising me that they'll protect me from my abusive ex after witnessing everything my ex done to me, and how it scarred me for life. I found out that my best friend was dating my ex behind my back for months, lying about it the whole time. I didn't know who my friend was dating, as they refused to introduce them in person. It turns out they've been dating behind my back a few weeks before my ex broke up with me. The whole thing scarred me to this day. It's been a year and I haven't heard from either of them since, though. Good riddance. I went to stay the night with one of my best friends. Long story short, the entire night was just her on her phone, not invested or listening to anything I said. I knew this because I tested it by saying something that could not be funny in the slightest. And she let out this huge fake laugh without looking up from her phone. This was a problem I've been having with her the past year at most. She wanted to go sleep super early because she was tired. I ended up lying and saying I needed to go home and she was more than fine with it. After all she wanted to do was sleep or text. Not even an hour after I'm home, I see her Snapchat story of her at her other new friend's house drinking and seemingly having a blast. Not only was it hurtful she did that, but that she didn't care I would see it. That was when I decided we were no longer best friends. I still get sad about it because we had been so close since junior high. Some people just change for the worst.
Am I the jerk for storming out of a restaurant and putting some friends in an awkward position? I need to start off by saying that I, 19, have mild autism and I was homeschooled. I have trouble navigating social situations, though I think I've gotten better since coming to college, which makes me think I might be in the wrong here. Since coming to college, I've got a group of friends and it's been fun except they insist that I'm in love with our new friend Mark, 20. He joined our group about a month ago. Me and Mark have a lot of things in common so we bonded quickly. Because of that, our other friends said that we are in love and made for each other. It was a good laugh until they kept repeating it. They kept making claims that made it sound like I had feelings for him and it got super weird. For instance, one day we were hanging out in Mark's dorm and I left when an emergency came up. In my rush I left my charger. It got returned to me but the others claimed I left it on purpose so I could leave a piece of me with him. Another time I was eating spaghetti and some of them said I was practicing to eat Mark's butt. Comments like this occur about 6 or 7 times a day. I have no idea where it's coming from. I'm not even gay. A week ago, I asked Mark if he was as uncomfortable with it as I am. He didn't know they said those things because they never said it to him. It's only been to me. I sent a message to our group chat. Guys, the comments you make about me and Mark are really making me uncomfortable. Especially since I found out they've only been directed at me. Please stop. I don't find them funny or amusing. They apologized and said they wouldn't do it again. Friday, 6 of us, excluding Mark, went to dinner together. While we were waiting to order, Jada, 19, asked if I wanted to date Mark. I told her no and to drop that stuff since it makes me uncomfortable. She asked why I was so uncomfortable if it's not true. I told her that's exactly why. It's not true but they keep talking like it is. She said it is true and she knows it's true. I could feel myself getting angry and didn't want to melt down, so I just left, walked out and drove back to my dorm. I texted the group chat that I did not wish to be around Jada given what happened. Jada got mad and said I was letting a guy ruin our friendship and I didn't know how to take a joke. I've ignored her messages and calls. All of our friends side with me, but a few of them said it was putting them in an awkward position and I should let it go. I already stated that I'm not the best with social interactions, so I'm thinking maybe I am the jerk.
My boyfriend revealed his true character. I'm now planning on leaving him. My boyfriend, 31 male, and I, 24 female, have been dating for almost 2 years. We're both gamers, but I would definitely class myself as a more casual gamer, whilst he spends every spare minute of his day racking up achievements and pushing himself to the limits. Honestly, it is something I really like about him. He's dedicated and puts in a lot of effort, and he absolutely transfers those skills to real-life situations, which is also a bonus because it means he isn't just some loser who can't function outside of an Xbox. About a year ago, we both decided we wanted to start streaming. I had a bit of a slow start, mostly just because he messaged every single person on his friends list to follow him and drop in, and the only follower I gained was him. Every other follower I earned organically through posting TikToks and Instagram posts about going live, and talking lots to my chat. I now have 23 followers, which isn't a lot, but boyfriend always brings up how I got all of them on my own whilst he had to bribe people to even follow him, yet alone watch even 5 minutes of a stream. I average at about 8 views per stream at the moment. While he is still unable to crack even 3, he's good at gaming, but honestly, he just doesn't promote his stream, and his streaming daily will eventually work mindset isn't enough. Of course, this has caused a lot of jealousy on his side, coupled with the fact that dudes are usually the ones to drop in and stay and watch for a while. I make a conscious effort to not be overly nice, not to pay too much attention to one person, all because in the past, my boyfriend has unfollowed me when other people have been chatting and he got mad thinking I wasn't paying enough attention to him. Anyways, we ended up getting into an argument yesterday because I said something about how I don't like the fact nobody knows I'm his girlfriend. I said I have his channel linked on mine. I promote him when I'm alone, and I don't like the thought of girls getting into his stream thinking they can flirt. Well, all hell broke loose. He told me he doesn't want people to know about me because I'm crazy, and he's ashamed of me. He told me the only reason I have any followers and watches is because I use my face in my profile picture, and because I'm a girl. He said I'm not even a real gamer because all I do is play crappy sandbox games and don't put any effort into being good at real games I play like Skyrim and Overwatch. He accused me of faking playing bad so I could ask dudes in my chat for help and flirt with them, and said that I have no attributes outside of being a girl gamer, pretty much insinuating I'm boring and dudes only come to watch because they think I'm attractive. So, I told him now it makes sense as to why he watches certain streamers, because he finds them attractive, and he tried to backtrack and say he isn't like other dudes and he actually likes them for their personalities, but it's too late. Now I know what he thinks of me, and know definitely that all of the women he watches is only because he finds them attractive, which has always been my biggest fear in this relationship because I know I'm not anywhere near as pretty as even his exes, and I hate thinking he's lusting after other women. He said that he wasn't going to stream again if it was going to cause issues, but I woke up after nightmares of him cheating on me to see he had streamed all night with his friend. He was laughing, not giving a single care that he ended up ghosting me all night and knew he left me to cry myself to sleep. My heart is broken. I want a man who cherishes me, wants to show me off, is proud to be with me and doesn't trigger my anxiety. He used to be that man. I'll probably never stream again because now it feels dirty and like I'm being used by men, and I almost completely stopped anyway because every time I streamed, he would start a fight out of jealousy. I guess all I will ever be is eye candy for desperate men. Even my boyfriend and my parents tell me I'll end up alone. I'm planning on leaving my boyfriend now, since he told me he is ashamed of me, and he should go be with a woman he's proud to be with. Thanks for reading, I guess. How did somebody you know ruin their life in one day? More like a day horribly altered my life. I was a teacher and coach. For a field trip, the principal could not afford 2 buses, so I had to walk about 10 girls to the field trip location and back to school, while the one bus was filled with the rest of the junior high students and faculty, about a mile each way. I chose the girls of my team because they would listen to me outdoors, unlike lots of middle school kids, while crossing the street in the crosswalk, with a walk signal in our favor. All the kids went first, and like girls they're clumped together and chatting while walking. I noticed a woman made a left turn into our crosswalk and never saw us as she tried to accelerate to beat an oncoming car. I knew she was going to run right through the girls. I pushed the kids forward, very forcefully. Most of the girls fell onto the pavement in front of other vehicles waiting at their red light. They were badly scraped up, like road rash from me pushing them, but no hospitals or doctors were needed for their scrapes. I don't remember the impact. I remember seeing a Pontiac symbol between the headlights. I came to, and I was in a whole different lane and facing where I had just come from. I could not get up. They say my body went up the car and off the driver's side, tearing the side mirror off the car and breaking her windshield. Horror and sobbing for my student athletes. The girls raised me onto a backboard when the ambulance came, which must have been traumatic. Now, 20 years later, I'm still an ambulatory wheelchair user, can't teach or coach, can't work at a desk, I have chronic pain. Yes, my life can be really sucky, but I would not change what I did that day. When I get low emotionally from all my limitations, I remember those girls. I watch them go to college, get married, grow into mothers, and hold impressive jobs in their fields, and when they show a photo on Facebook of their happy moment, it recharges me to know they are safe, healthy, and happy, and it reaffirms my decision to save them from harm.
Am I the a-hole for being truthful and admitting that I find my wife unattractive after her surgery? My wife had plastic surgery recently. We had discussed it and I was against it. It was not my decision and ultimately I had no say. She looks weird now. She had the fat sucked out of her face, lip fillers, a neck lift, other stuff I don't really get. She gives me uncanny valley vibes now. It freaks me out. She is fully healed now and she wants us to go back to normal. Like me initiating sex. I have done so but not as much as I used to. And when I do I try and make sure there is very little light. It's been a few months and I kind of dread having to look at her. Obviously she has noticed. She has been bugging me to tell her what's up. I've tried telling her I'm just tired from work. Or that I'm run down. Really anything except for the truth. She broke down and asked me if I was having an affair. I said that I wasn't. She asked to look at my phone. I unlocked it for her and handed it over. I wasn't worried about her finding anything because there is nothing to find. She spent an hour looking through it and found nothing. She asked me to explain why I changed. I tried explaining that I just wasn't that interested right now. Nothing I said was good enough for her. She kept digging. I finally told the truth. I wasn't harsh or brutally honest. I just told her that her new face wasn't something I found attractive and that I was turned off. She asked if that's why I turn off all the lights now. I said yes. She started crying and said that she needed time alone. She went to stay with her sister. I have been called every name in the book since this happened. Her sister said I'm a piece of shit for insulting my wife's looks. Her friends all think I'm the asshole. I tried not to say anything. I can't force myself to find her attractive. I still love her but her face is just weird now. She looks like the blue alien from The Fifth Element. Do you think I handled this well or am I the a-hole? Discuss this as the comments. I caught my ex cheating. So I confronted him and the truth was shocking. My ex Jake cheated on me for 5 months with the sister of his best friend. I thought she had a husband and 2 children so I was never suspicious about anything. She did in fact have 2 children, but she also left her husband for my ex. Fast forward to my birthday, my ex and I went out to party and we slept in on Sunday. On this Sunday, I go to drive home and when I drive out of the street I get a call from this person, Angela. I find it super unusual so already I'm feeling a little anxious. If Angela is calling me out of nowhere, it certainly can't be good news. Suddenly, a car stops next to mine and guess who it is? Angela. She gets out and asks me, "Did you sleep at Jake's house?" And I'm just looking at her and thinking, who are you to ask if I slept at my boyfriend's house? I say that I did and bam she tells me, well I slept there on Wednesday. And I've been having sex with him since May. It was September. I was shocked and said that I needed some proof because I thought she might be pranking me. She showed me pictures of them laying in bed with both of them shirtless, going to the movies, and going shopping together. I mean I was too stunned to speak and couldn't comprehend anything, but then she proceeds to show me a positive pregnancy test. Please keep watching, it gets so much worse, and says really cockily, he even got me pregnant. She didn't let me ask any questions and just left after dropping this bombshell on me. So I called my mom for advice, who told me to talk to Jake to get his side of the story. I drove to his and when I walked in he already knew what had happened because he had mine and Angela's location so he filled in the effing blanks. I had a conversation with him and he didn't even try to deny anything. He was pretty calm about the whole thing which told me that he was not happy in our relationship and was actually glad we were breaking up. That hurt the most because when people get caught cheating, they usually beg for forgiveness, another chance, and they say they'll change. But him? He was acting like I was talking to him about the most boring thing ever. It was like I wasn't even worth fighting for, even after the cheating. So, I broke up with him officially and told him I never wanted to see or speak to him ever again. Things were so hectic that day that I completely forgot that Angela told and showed me that she was pregnant. I figured as the victim in this situation, the least Jake could do was give me some amount of closure. I ended up sending him a message asking about this baby, but he said that's the one thing Angela did lie about. There was no baby. I kind of just left it at that. The whole thing added to the dramatics, but at least I wasn't in a dead-end relationship with a horrible boyfriend. I just forgot about the situation months later and really moved on. Until I saw the worst thing ever on Facebook. I was still friends with Jake's mom and I actually saw a gender reveal video of Jake and Angela. I got some details from mutuals but apparently, after I told Jake that Angela had said she was pregnant, they decided to try for a baby and even became an official couple.
My jealous boyfriend doesn't like my best friend and accused me of cheating with her. I've been in a relationship with my boyfriend for almost a year. He always had been a bit of the jealous type, but it got worse with time. There is this girl who I considered my best friend. I've known her for 10 plus years and we always have been really close, to the point that she's almost like the sister I never had. I'm a bi woman and she's straight. There was never any ambiguity between us. She's my best friend, that's all. She's also been in a happy relationship with her boyfriend for 5 years. My boyfriend never liked her. I think that it's because we are close and that he wants me all for himself. When I started dating him, I made sure I spent a lot of time with him, because I loved him and I knew that's what he wanted. But anytime I was seeing friends, he was being jealous and upset. He was also suspicious, even though I never did anything wrong. He told me that I was too close to my best friend and that he was sure something was going on with her, intimately. I told him plenty of times that she was like my sister, that I wasn't attracted to her and that she wasn't into girls. It didn't change his opinion at all. He made stupid reflections. For example, he said, "Does she wear summer dresses to excite you? What do you do when you go to her house? Why does she compliment you like that?" He also told me that he wasn't comfortable with me going to the beach with her, or sleeping at her house. Even her boyfriend said his attitude was controlling and immature. I made the mistake of telling this to my BF. He asked me if I had the intention to have intimacy with him as well. When we're together and it's only the two of us, he changes into a sweet, affectionate, and funny guy. But, he's turning jealous and suspicious when I'm not with him. Because I'm bi, he thinks that I'm attracted to everyone. That's a totally ignorant way to think. I'm really starting to get fed up with him and his controlling and suspicious behavior. I'm not saying that I'm perfect, but I never cheated on him or on anyone. I'm tired of having to tell him that there's nothing between my best and I. I'm also afraid that things will get worse if I stay with him. I don't want to lose my friends because of him. I probably let things go because I was in love with him and he showed a good side of him as well. But now I think that I should leave. What do you think of that situation?
Cuba was by far the most disappointing country I've ever been to. The thing is, Cuba itself is beautiful. The majority of people you meet, who are used to tourists, are really welcoming and friendly. Like, when we went, we had a scheduling slip with our Airbnb. The lady who ran it didn't hesitate to reach out to her friend circle, and she set me and the lady I was traveling with up in a spare bedroom of a nearby apartment for the night. When we got there, the couple who lived in the apartment were really cool. We spent the evening trading shots of Havana Club and trying bits of Spanish and English out on each other. Another time, we went on a bit of a road trip in one of their classic cars, with a tour guide couple. They were great people to chat with, though it took a little bit of prodding to get them to break out of the tour guide routine. And that's where this sort of takes a bit of a turn, to explain why I was disappointed. One time, as we were coming back to the car, I popped a step or two ahead to open the door for the lady tour guide. The guy tour guide, who spoke no English, and hadn't tried communicating with us the whole way down, was ecstatic and suddenly very expressive. We found out that in all the years they'd been doing this, it was the first time a tourist had done what is generally considered a courtesy towards them. He also felt comfortable at that point letting us know that one of the main reasons he's the driver on those outings was that otherwise tourists have had a history of basically roping their female tour guides, so now, any company that cares about their staff, sends along an ex-military guy as a driver. From there, I started to really see what sorts of things the tourists were doing. Like, we went on a longer bus ride between a couple towns, and there were other tourists who thought nothing of taking up entire rows of seats for a single person, while a Cuban amputee is forced to stand. Or you go to a tourist ice cream parlor, which is really pleasant and showcases the Russian influence from the Cold War period a bit. But the locals can't go there, only tourists are allowed. Locals are lined up around the block to try and get a single spoonful of ice cream as a treat. We went and saw John Lennon Park, which has a posted guard to keep the rabble away. Our tour guide at the time took a wrong turn as we left, and we saw a guy getting jumped for his shoes. In line for our flight home, we overheard these two disgusting East Coasters, basically comparing the young women they'd had intimacy with this time around. And how they couldn't wait to go back again. The tourists are just such a large source of revenue it seems, that they get a sort of bubble placed around them, and talking to the locals, I got the real impression that efforts to deviate from the fiction are met with brutal force. It made me feel really disgusting as a tourist, and ashamed of my country for how so many of us seem to be acting. Today I messed up by telling my daughter her girlfriend is my ex. So I, 40 male, have a daughter, 21 female, who started dating her partner, 30 female, about a month ago. She called me to tell me about this new encounter when they went on her first date. Her mother has not been in the picture since she was an infant, so me and my daughter are very close, and now that she is an adult, I can proudly say we have a great bond. She has always been hardworking, and after graduating high school, she decided to start working before choosing a college. About 6 months ago she moved out on her own. About a year ago I met this woman in a bar, we had a few drinks and we ended up at her place. Things went well, and after a few dates I decided to lay down what I wanted in a relationship. We discussed it and she wanted to have a kid, but I already had the pleasure of raising my daughter, and was unwilling to do it again. So we decided to break it off. I never told my daughter because it wasn't anything serious. Well, a month ago I got a call from my daughter telling me she went on an amazing date with a woman who she instantly connected with. I was happy for her, and wished her the best with future encounters. Well, after a few weeks and several dates, they decided to make it official. So my daughter changed her relationship status on Facebook and posted a picture of her and my ex. The wave of shock that rushed over me was, to say the least, paralyzing. I didn't know what to do, so I called my daughter and invited her over alone to talk. Well, we sat down on the couch and I explained everything. As you would expect, she did not take it well at all, especially because she and my ex planned on inviting me to a meal later in the week, which would have been horribly awkward. My daughter left shortly after and apparently talked to her girlfriend. Once my daughter showed my ex a picture of me, apparently she knew right away, and expectedly, they ended the relationship. Now my daughter is a lot more distant from me, and I assume it's because she needs the space, but how are we supposed to go back to normal after this? I doubt my daughter will look at me the same, considering we could barely maintain eye contact after I broke the news to her. Did I do wrong by breaking up with my boyfriend who never let me eat? My love language revolves around acts of service. I find joy in buying thoughtful gifts for my boyfriend and eagerly anticipate the moment I can surprise him with them. Whenever he visits my house, I always make sure he feels comfortable and offer him food, drinks, or anything else he may need. Whenever I have food, no matter how small, I instinctively offer it to him because taking care of him brings me happiness. I even go as far as feeding him in the car when he's driving, as I feel guilty enjoying a meal next to him while his hands are occupied with the steering wheel. Recently, I bought him waffles and Starbucks without him even needing to ask. However, there lies a problem: he is the exact opposite. Despite me openly expressing my concerns and having arguments about it, there hasn't been much change. He eats next to me without offering me anything. When we go shopping, he only buys things for himself and rarely thinks to get something for me, even if it's as small as a chocolate bar. I'm independent and perfectly capable of paying for myself, so I don't mind doing so. But it happens so frequently that I find myself feeling like I'm single, without someone who watches out for me. In the early stages of our relationship, I could spend hours at his place without being offered anything. Though he has occasionally paid for my food or given me some, it's inconsistent and hasn't happened lately. One day he might ask if I want something, and the next day he'll eat without even considering me. It's this inconsistency that bothers me. There have been instances where I told him I was starving while we were in the car, and he would disregard it and continue driving, without me having to ask multiple times. There was one time we were on a long drive, hours away from home, and I told him I was in pain and needed immediate food. He agreed but kept driving for at least another hour. If I hadn't stood my ground, he wouldn't have made the effort to exit the highway and find a restaurant. I was so dehydrated that my urine was dark orange and strongly smelled of ammonia. It had reached a critical point. We argued about it, but he still came up with feeble excuses, promising to change. Months later, today, I found myself in the car with him once again, and he started eating his food without offering me any. When I got upset, he claimed to not know what was wrong and mentioned that he had gotten me something but was waiting for me to finish what I was doing. However, I wasn't even aware he had bought food because he didn't inform me. How could he begin eating on his own and not think to include me? Not even a simple "hey, I got us food, let's eat together." He argued that he was waiting for me to finish my task and that he wasn't genuinely eating, he was merely checking the temperature of the food. It made no sense to me. His excuses: "I didn't know. You didn't speak up. I wasn't sure where you wanted to eat," and even offering food he knows I don't consume, are all clearly empty. I could continue listing more instances, such as finding out he had been in contact with his ex, even giving her money, which he initially lied about when confronted. He tries to play the hero, claiming he was only trying to help because she was depressed. In the end, I decided to leave him. Treating myself to something nice because I can't comprehend how I tolerated such behavior. Why did I give so much care and receive so little in return? Feeling burned out from my relationship, what can I do? To provide some background, my partner and I have been together for 3 years, and we have been living together for 1 year. I've been considering proposing, but there are some issues weighing on my mind. Financially, I have a well-paying job and earn about double my partner's income. We have a system where we split our expenses, with a 75-25 split. However, as inflation has hit, things have become a bit tougher for us, and I've asked for a little extra help. Whenever I bring this up, she becomes defensive, cries, and says things like it's not her fault she has a low-paying job and no degree. Another concern is the clutter in our apartment. It accumulated when her parents sold their house, and it has been sitting in our dining area since last year. I've repeatedly asked her to clean it up, offering my assistance, but she always claims she's too tired or overwhelmed. Even when I offer to help, she insists it's her responsibility and that she will handle it. Unfortunately, only a small portion of the clutter has been taken care of, and she hasn't made any progress in finding a solution. On days when I work from home, she sleeps in until past noon. I'm trying my best to be patient because I understand that she's going through a tough time and is dealing with depression. However, I feel like something needs to change. I come home exhausted from work, and I hate feeling like a nag when I ask her to do something for me because she perceives it as me being demanding. I genuinely believe that I'm not asking for too much, but now that she's unemployed and unable to collect any income, a lot of the responsibility falls on me. I'm not sure what else I can do. I appreciate the support from everyone in this subreddit for listening to me vent. How did someone ruin your life? My girl best friend asked me out. First time this happened was in high school. She and I were in journalism together. As part of the class we had to share our phone numbers. It was so that if we needed someone to cover an event, we could always find someone. Anyway, she calls one day. She wants to get more into photography. I was the photo editor, so not too unusual. I take her with me to a few events I was working, and she was always thankful at the end. Looking back, it should have struck me that her form of affection was getting more intimate. At first it was a hug, then it was calling or texting just to talk, then it was talk about how we make a great team, and lastly she tried to stay bolted to my side during the day. Now I was still oblivious that this is flirting. I took it as her being just a touchy-feely kind of person. One day after working a game, she asks me outright why I haven't asked her out. I shot back, why would I do that? She goes off about how she's been trying for weeks to drop hints that she's into me, that I was flirting back, and if I thought she was ugly. She started tearing up about how she thought I liked her and must have only been keeping her going to be cruel. Mind you, at this point, I haven't said a word. After a few moments of silence, I said, I'm homosexual. She called bullshit. I didn't look, sound or act homosexual. At that point, I could have walked away but I didn't. It took a while to get her to accept that fact. Out of spite she started doing evil acts with her friends. First it was annoying stuff like denting my car, but then she started doing more and more. One night she saw me another friend that was a girl and then mistaked it for a date, so later that week she drugged me, got me nude and sent recordings to everyone in the school. But after that her friends started switching up on her. Imagine if someone did that to a girl? They said to her. Even though the first couple of weeks were awful, eventually for me everything turned out fine, and people were very supportive. However, she dropped out of school from peer pressure and became a drug addict. Teen fathers, what did you do when you found out she was pregnant? This isn't my story, but my sister's, but I am greatly involved in it. My sister got pregnant when she was 15. She didn't tell anyone for months and you couldn't see it, because she was always a bit on the heavy side. She told us when she was already 5 months in and it became noticeable that she was thicker than usual. She was crying a lot and said she was afraid. My parents and I, 21 at the time, told her that we would be there for her, no matter what she decides. We left it completely up to her. She kept the baby and my nephew was born at the end of 2010. I just started going to college. The daddy left shortly after the kid was born, because he had no interest in it at all. So my parents kicked him out and my sister was thankful for it. However, after my nephew was born my sister became really depressed, so I told her I could care for my nephew for a few days/weeks until she gets everything in order. Fast forward 2 years. I took care of him every single day and sometimes even at night. My sister actually got a lot better but decided to spend her time going back to school. I put that in emphasis, because she actually didn't go. She lied. Instead she went out with friends, hung around somewhere and so on. After we found out we sat her down and told her that she needs to woman up and take care of her child. She agreed, but we didn't see much of it to be honest. I concentrated on college more and she met someone. He was 15 years older than her, but seemed like a nice guy. Seemed is the key word, because it came apparent that he was a deadbeat. No job, likes to say that it's the foreigner's fault and has a huge amount of debt. Fast forward a few months and my sister tells us she is pregnant and will move in with him. She was almost 18 at the time so we couldn't do anything about it. After she moved out she told us she got pregnant the first time, because she, quote, didn't want to go to school no more. The baby daddy can pay for me. Second time the same thing, only that the dude had his own apartment, together with his mother, I kid you not. In both cases she didn't realize she wouldn't get any money, when the fathers don't have jobs that pay well enough and a huge amount of debt. Nowadays she is married to the second guy, still lives with him and his mother and has 3 children. All at the age of 20. She looks like 40 now and is slowly beginning to realize her huge mistake. The kicker is that I am not allowed to see my nephew anymore, because apparently I am a bad influence on him. While her husband smokes, sits on the couch all day, watching soccer and drinking beer, I gave my nephew a PlayStation as a gift and played video games with him all day when he visited me. And that's just bad parenting. Kids are not supposed to play video games. Oh, and I also told him that I don't believe in God, after he asked me if I did, because his mother always answers every question of his with because God made it so. But I'm the bad parent. Right. My wife and her gay best friend are getting too intimate for my liking. My wife Emily met her best friend Chuck in high school. They became close friends and Chuck came out to Emily as gay and Emily was supportive. A year or so later Chuck came out to his parents. They disowned him and kicked him out, and Chuck ended up living with Emily and her parents for the rest of high school. Emily and I started dating after college and she told me all about Chuck and how close they were and how he was like a brother. I met Chuck and we got along and became friends. At the time Chuck was dating a guy, they ended up moving in together about the same time that Emily and I got engaged. Emily and I have been married for 5 years now. I took on a year-long project in another city for work. I have to leave at 5:30 a.m. every morning and get home around 6:30 p.m. Emily and I had a long talk about my job before I took on this project. We knew it would be a sacrifice for me to be working so much, but I'm getting more money than I ever thought I would. After this project we can pay off our student debt and start trying to have a baby. In March Chuck caught his boyfriend cheating. He was devastated. Emily immediately told him he could move in with us. I was fine with him moving in, but not happy that Emily didn't even discuss it with me first. Chuck was pretty broken up and Emily was giving him lots of love and attention. I was fine with it, because I know how much she loves Chuck and he did need her. I also did my best to support him and make him feel loved. For a while this was fine, but as time went on Emily has continued to pour all of her attention into Chuck. Sometimes I get home from work and neither Emily nor Chuck are there, and I found out they went to a movie or out to dinner together. The past few weeks several things have happened. The 3 of us went to a party and someone joked about Chuck being our third wheel and Emily said, Chuck is not the third wheel. I said what? And she said I've known Chuck longer than I've known you. A week or so after that Emily and Chuck went out dancing one night. I had to work the next day so I stayed home. I woke up at about 3 a.m. and Emily was not in bed. I went and found her and Chuck cuddled up on the couch asleep with the TV on. Both of those things made me uncomfortable. I also realized I had been working so much I was just sort of letting Emily and Chuck plan everything, and I had not planned a date night in a while. I decided I needed to be more active and so I planned a date night for last Friday. When I first told Emily she was excited, as we have not been on a date just the 2 of us in a while. Friday I got home at 6:30 and Emily and Chuck were not there. I took a shower and got ready. About 7:15 I finally called Emily, as we had reservations at 8. She answered and when I asked where she was she said her and Chuck had gone shopping and were getting some dinner. I was kind of stunned and asked about our date. She laughed and said oh I forgot. Oh well, and that was that. She didn't even invite me to join them. I've tried to never be controlling of Emily or tell her what to do. I also tend to shut down when I get angry. When Emily forgot our date I was mad so I didn't say anything right then, but I knew I needed to address how I was feeling. So later that evening I told her we needed to talk. I had written down some things so I could stay focused. I started by saying that I loved Chuck and he was always welcome in our home, but that I felt like our marriage was suffering and we needed to work on ourselves. Emily blew the F up. She thought I was attacking Chuck and she started defending him and attacking me. We have never had a big fight before, we always talk and work things out. I was stunned that she was attacking me. She said some awful things. Then she said Chuck is my soulmate and you just have to get used to that. I just shut down. I didn't even know how to process that. I love Emily more than anything in the world, but in that moment I realized she loves Chuck more than she loves me. I thought Emily and I were soulmates, but to hear her say she considers someone else her soulmate has been devastating. I don't remember the rest of the talk. She huffed off after a while and slept on the couch. Her and Chuck left together on Saturday and were gone most of the day. When they got back she was acting like nothing had happened. On Sunday she even made a small joke and batted her eyes at me, something she does when she's flirting with me. Normally I love it, but this time it just made me sick. I told her this was a busy week at work and I was just going to stay at a hotel near the job site, so I haven't seen her since Sunday night.
When did you realize you married the wrong person? About 1.5 years into our marriage, she got an internship with Disney and had to move to the other side of the county for 7 months. 6 months into the internship she tells me that she met someone else, but she continued to string me along for another 6 months saying she doesn't want to get divorced but she's just been really confused. It turns out she just wanted to keep using me to pay all the bills while she finished her degree. Once she was a month away from finishing school, she admitted that she never really wanted a relationship with me, she only started dating me to make her ex jealous. She also admitted to cheating on me for about 90% of our 10-year-long relationship and only stuck around because her ex didn't want to get back together and she didn't want to take care of herself. Before you take that life-changing step saying I do, I highly recommend you do a private and anonymous background report with public data check. I was able to find criminal records, driving records, and even their relatives, which can save you a lot of trouble down the road.
My delusional husband accused me of cheating because our daughter had blonde hair. We're both brunettes. He hated my reaction to the paternity test results. Have been married my husband for 2 years and gave birth to our daughter 5 weeks ago. Our daughter came out with blonde hair and pale blue eyes. It came as a huge surprise to my husband and I because my husband and I have brown hair and brown eyes. While I thought it was cute and maybe a recessive gene, my husband had a completely different reaction. My husband freaked out and started yelling at me as soon as we were alone. Anytime I tried to explain that, sometimes, babies are born with lighter hair and eyes that get darker over time. He demanded a paternity test and threatened to divorce me if I didn't comply, so I did the test. He then stormed out and told me that he doesn't want to be anywhere near a dirty cheater like me. He went to his parents' house for the first 3 weeks of our daughter's life, leaving me to deal with sleep deprivation, dirty diapers, and feedings all alone. It wasn't enough for him that I was alone, though, he also fed lies to his parents. It came to the point where my mother-in-law called me and told me that if the paternity test revealed that the child wasn't his, she would make sure I was taken to the cleaners during the divorce. All I had was my baby sister who flew 3 hours to help me. Yesterday, I got the results of the paternity test back. I invited my husband to our house to open it with me, and he came with a snarky attitude. He asked me if I was ready to lose this house in the divorce, and how he can't wait to find out how I'll be suffering as a single mom. I didn't say anything and opened the test up. When I saw the results, I started laughing so hard and read out the results to him. You are the father. My husband had this shocked, kinda mortified look on his face with his eyes wide as he heard me. I couldn't help but say, I told you so. And started laughing at the way he looked. My husband snapped out of his shock and started yelling at me for laughing at him. We argued for a bit, which was mainly him telling me how selfish I am, before my sister came downstairs and my husband shut up. After that, my husband went back to his parents' house to clear his head, and 2-3 hours later, my mother-in-law called to scold me about laughing in my husband's face, because apparently it was kicking him while he was down. She's also left a couple nasty texts essentially saying the same thing this morning. I don't think I'm a jerk, but I'd like outsider perspective on this. Skin professionals, what's something you've had to tell a client that you thought for sure was common knowledge? I once mistook my 20-year-old client for a grandma and she got so mad she threw her bowl of cucumber mask at me. For context, I've been an esthetician for 5 years at a high-end spa with rich clients, so I rarely treat people with scaly, pimply or dirty faces since they've already managed to get perfect skin. That's why I was shocked out of my mind that I had a client who had all that, and more. Her skin was dry like a lizard's, and she had every kind of wrinkle, like forehead lines, crow's feet, and lines that ran from her mouth to her chin. I was actually shocked people had skin this bad, but it got worse when she laid down on my facial bed because I saw her other imperfections up close. She had hair on her nose and cheeks, pores the size of golf balls, skin blemishes and acne, and her face was so red I thought she was blushing when she saw me. This felt like a tough one to fix up, so I got right to work. First I used a hydrating cleanser to cleanse the skin without stripping it of moisture. Then I used a mild chemical exfoliant to remove dead skin cells, followed by a facial steamer to open up her pores and soften her skin. I extracted her blackheads and my hand almost went limp from how many I had to extract. We were already halfway into our session and she hadn't said a word. I'm a blabbermouth and the silence was killing me, so while I was mixing her bowl of cucumber I told her I thought it was great that old women were taking care of their skin too, since most of our clientele are young women who are 20 to 40 years old. She sat upright on the bed and asked me how old I thought she was. I told her I thought she was a grandma, and that I didn't know retirement homes allowed visits to the spa. In an instant, she looked redder than when she first walked in, which I thought was impossible. She grabbed the bowl I was mixing and threw it at me. I looked down at my slimy covered clothes that looked like someone had jizzed all over me, and asked her why she would do that. I had half a mind to fire her as a client and ban her from the spa, but she slammed her ID in my face, and after some quick mental math I realized she was actually 22. She stood there with her hands crossed and eyebrows furrowed, but I felt like I was getting scolded by my grandma. She asked me why I thought she was in a retirement home, and I told her that she had more wrinkles than any 22-year-old I knew. She sat down on my facial bed and said I was right, and that I wasn't the first person to think she was so old. She said all her friends were embarrassed to have her around, so they just stopped inviting her to places, and whenever she talked to guys they said they weren't interested in cougars. She started using tons of makeup to cover her face up, but it ended up looking cakey from how much she had to put just to cover her pores. She choked back a sob and she nearly broke down on my facial bed. I couldn't just sit there and watch her cry, so I told her that I had something she could use, and showed her the sunscreen that our spa sells. I explained that we sell a growth factor sunscreen because it doesn't have any harmful chemicals, rubs out clear, and its gel-like texture feels great on the skin. The sunscreen protects the skin while rejuvenating it as well. My client asked me how that would help, and I told her that I treat high-end clientele who religiously buy the growth factor sunscreen every time they come in for a treatment. I never had to treat them for wrinkles, acne, or other skin conditions like I had to do with her, or any of my other non-high-end clients, because the rich people's skin was always flawless. They just came in for a relaxing spa day. I explained that this was only the case with my rich clients, because they decide to spend a bit more on sunscreen than the average person, but it saves them thousands on other skincare products and extensive treatments from me. And I was sure that if she saw them, she would assume they had work done because they didn't have any wrinkles or hyperpigmentation and looked young, despite being older than my client. But the rich don't compromise their skin. Instead, they maintain their natural beauty by using things like the growth factor sunscreen. I made sure to tell my client that my rich clientele apply the sunscreen every day, not just on sunny days, because UV rays still penetrate windows and clouds, and it prevents their skin from being damaged and breaking out. That's why they invest in it, and they never have to worry about premature aging and breakouts or any other skin problems that normal people have. My client then asked how a sunscreen was able to keep rich people from aging, so I explained that the growth factor sunscreen had a clinically studied ingredient called kynotin. Kynotin prevents aging in the skin by protecting the DNA and skin cells from all sorts of damage. It directly reduces roughness on the skin, wrinkles, and uneven pigmentation as well. Since my client had wrinkled skin, applying something with kynotin on her skin would improve the feeling of her skin, to make it soft and smooth. I recommended she use the sunscreen too if she wanted naturally perfect skin like my rich clients, but she almost freaked out when she saw the price. I explained to her that people spend thousands on clothes, makeup, and equipment to make their bodies look good. However, our skin is one of the only things you can never take off, so I told her she needed to invest in it, and the rich surely do, which is why their skin looks better than all poor people's skin. Besides, we really needed to get the fundamentals right. Otherwise, she'll have to live with damaged, wrinkly skin for the rest of her life, and never have a chance at clear skin. To further ease her mind, I mentioned that the growth factor sunscreen doubles as a primer, so if I shaved her peach fuzz off, she could implement it in her makeup routine and it wouldn't make her face cakey. That way, her makeup would look flawless and she would be protecting her skin barrier when she goes outside. After explaining it that way, she agreed to use the sunscreen daily, and I scheduled her for a follow-up appointment in 3 weeks after I finished her session. When she returned, I barely recognized her until she slammed her ID in my face again. When she sat down on my facial bed, she let me know that she applied the sunscreen every day and she couldn't believe how much her complexion had changed. Her skin looked smoother and healthier, and she liked how pretty that made her look. Every time she applied it, she had a rejuvenating feeling that gave her more confidence to tackle her day. And honestly, it seemed like it calmed her stress, which meant she wasn't getting new wrinkles on her face. Her crow's feet were nearly gone, and the lines that ran from her mouth to her chin, which weren't that apparent to begin with, were fully gone. She also got rid of all her other skincare products because the growth factor sunscreen was the only thing she actually needed to clear her skin. She talked about how applying sunscreen while indoors made a huge difference to her face because it always gave her a consistent natural look, and she could feel her skin barrier improving. With that, her skin blemishes disappeared and her cheeks weren't nearly as red as the first time I saw her. Now that her skin was improving, everyone around her noticed the difference. She told me that people were being nicer to her in public, so she was finally making friends again, and she was getting free treats from guys at stores and getting called pretty, along with them asking for her number. She said people usually kept their distance from her and she wasn't used to all the attention, but she really liked it. This made her stress levels drop dramatically. Surprisingly, she also mentioned that her mom had started using the growth factor sunscreen and her skin was hydrated so well she was looking younger by the day. I told her that the difference between people who use growth factor sunscreen versus normal sunscreen is that they will look younger, like they're in their 20s, while others will look more like grandmas, like she had first looked like when I saw her. She didn't appreciate that comment, but at least she'll stop being called a cougar now. Keep in mind, the only thing she was using on her skin was a growth factor sunscreen by Sunray, and her skin was already starting to clear up. I knew now that her fundamentals were getting set. All that was left was treating her pores and other acne problems, and I was glad she was finally starting to be happy with her appearance. Since the first time I saw her, I almost threw up too.
From bakery to $1 million artist. But before you go making all sorts of assumptions, let me correct that. I was an artist. When I was a little girl, I began painting Parisian street scenes, ballerinas in motion, animals of all sorts. I took it all in, and I portraited it out only through a colorful brush. I grew up and became a dancer. Soon, I would study in Paris, where I secured a scholarship at the Paris Conservatory, one of the most highly renowned dance schools in the world. I sold my paintings, some divine works of art that I can't believe I've ever completed, and used the money towards my plane ticket and my lodging during my stay in the city. After a successful and triumphant 4 years of holding my own in the world of world-class ballerinas, and having no more use for my paintbrush and dance shoes, I retired. I went back home to my unfinished paintings, which I had vowed to complete upon my return. But I never did. I had a family to care for and some bills that I never paid. I eventually settled into a hard-working and thankless career in a bakery. I struggled for 15 years to make ends meet. I never had the time or the money to nurture my artistic sensibilities. I was convinced that my days as a budding artist had come and gone. One day, with no warning and little time to breathe, the doors to my life opened, and I found myself staring down at an old trunk I'd stowed away in the attic of my home, which I had bought with the small inheritance money left to me by my parents. I opened it. Most of the things inside were dusty and covered in cobwebs, and then I found a box. It was large and heavy. I knew what was inside. It was a small painting that I had done much in the very beginning of my artistic journey, a Pavlova-like ballerina in the midst of a fairy-like pirouette. I became mesmerized. I took the painting down and held it in my hands. I put it back down and brought it back up. I couldn't believe it was still there. I laughed and cried in the same moment. I rushed down to the kitchen to find my husband. I told him about the painting. "Do you remember? You suggested I sell it." But I said no. How could I have been so careless to have stowed the painting in the attic, away from sight and away from mind? How could I have been so dismissive? With my husband's help, I put the painting in plain sight in the kitchen, where I would find myself staring at it every morning as I made my husband his lunch and every evening when I put the children to bed. My husband encouraged me to finish it. I felt as if I were extracting myself from quicksand. I spent hours each day looking at my progress, and I couldn't remember the last time I was so excited and so alive. We had a calendar, and I marked off the days. On what I had estimated would be the day of the completion of the painting, I handed her over to a local gallery owner. He liked it. He really liked it. "Can I keep it for a week?" he asked. "You can have it for as long as you'd like," I said. How could I send her away after 15 years? I didn't have to. Just 1 week later, he called and made it official. I had sold my first painting. I had received $1 million. The money was transferred directly into our bank account. This has been going on for 3 years. I am now painting every day. I have sold 2 more paintings since the first one. They were equally well received. People are coming out of the woodwork to learn more about me. Journalists are making it a point to come and see me work in the studio I've made for myself. I'm not sure about any of this yet. What I do know is that I will use the money to quit my job, request a formal retirement from my employer, and freeze my eggs.
I'm pressing charges against my murderer mother-in-law, but my husband thinks she's innocent. This is one of the most dark and devastating things I've ever lived though, and it's not even over. I can't believe this happened all because I trusted my husband and his family. I don't think I'll ever be the same after this is all over. I'm Filipino and my husband is Chinese. His mom died to approve of me from the beginning and has always told him that Filipinos are maids only. At the beginning of our marriage, my husband defended me. He even threatened to cut ties with her. Behavior escalated. So she backed off. He proposed and that's where trouble slowly started again. She was very upset. My teenage sister-in-law told me that my mother-in-law didn't expect us to last too long cause she expected my husband to come to his senses. She tried to jeopardize our wedding, threatened not to come. She went even farther and tried to tell our guests that there was a typo in our invitation card and gave them the wrong date. Luckily most guests were confused and just reconfirmed it with us. My husband actually waved it off and said that his mom is just worried for him and that I should understand because she grew up in a very traditional home. This was such a giant red flag that I regret ignoring now, but I was completely in love. I became pregnant soon after marrying my husband and about a month ago I was 8 months along. My husband insisted on going to mother-in-law house for a family reunion. I didn't want a cause of the human growing in me and too exhausted cause I was still working. He insisted cause his mom will not take no for an answer. So we went. I can't express just how much I regret this decision. It wasn't like this was the first time my husband had gaslit me into ignoring my feelings, but it would certainly be the last time. I'm pressing charges against my murderer mother-in-law, but my husband thinks she's innocent. In my first post, I talked about how my racist mother-in-law had always gone out of her way to be rude and disrespectful to me. My husband used to stick up for me against her, but he totally stopped after we got pregnant together. He dragged me to a family reunion dinner at his mom's house that I begged not to go to, and that's where disaster struck. At the family reunion dinner, I started feeling sick and lightheaded. I told my husband about it but he waved me off, told me to go up to his old room and lay down. I said this was different, and we should go to the hospital just in case. His mom butted in and told me not to ruin their dinner, just shut up and go upstairs. I gave husband a look and said, "You really gonna let her talk to me like that?" That dickhead just shrugged and told me to calm down. I did not go up. I knew something was wrong. I called my dad to get him to bring me to the hospital. I felt like I was floating, body felt numb and I wanted to puke. I felt like fainting. Dad arrived and I left without letting them know. They didn't care, so why should I? I don't know how else to say this, my baby's heartbeat stopped. I was told the chances at this point of pregnancy was low. But it happened. I was drugged and also had alcohol in my system. But I didn't drink any since I was pregnant and I don't do drugs. Sister-in-law admitted she saw mother-in-law added stuff into my drinks and food later on. My husband refused to believe that and sided with mother-in-law, saying I must have taken something accidentally. Sister-in-law told him what mother-in-law did, but he still don't believe it. Sister-in-law always hated mother-in-law. Hubs was the fave child. I reported it to the police. Sister-in-law is my witness. I pressed charges. I will not stop till she's behind bars. I told some of my closest friends about it. They said I'm an off for divorcing him. But how can I be with someone who doesn't side with me on this? Who refused to believe his mom is the reason. Our baby is gone forever? He hasn't even acknowledged that she's gone. All he cares about is clearing his mom's name. I'm devastated. Am I the here? Why does some say I am?
I had a son when I was 14 and none of my family knows besides my aunt. I was assaulted by a family member until I was 13 and moved in with my aunt. She's a good person that took me in and helped me get away from the bad people in my family. When we found out I was pregnant, she guessed how it happened. I hadn't told her about what had happened, but she said she always expected it but never had proof. She came up with a way to get me away. She pretended to get pregnant and asked my parents if she could get custody so I could move in with her, get homeschooled, and help her out. They said no at first because they knew they'd lose out on food stamps, so she offered to pay them whatever they would have gotten in food stamps in cash in exchange for me living there. They said yeah once they found out cash was involved, and my aunt gave them some extra cash every month to keep them out of our lives. My parents are your regular redneck junkies who are no good to anyone. I had the kid in 1988 and have seen my parents a handful of times since then. She went to court to get custody of me and said my parents dropped me off at her house one day and never picked me up. I went along with that story in court and it worked out. I said we went back to my house day after day but they were never home. They were ordered to come to court but never showed up. She got full custody of me and I lived with her until I was able to get myself a good job. I don't work the best job in the world, but it's better than where I came from and I'm proud of that. Anywho, she took me to get an abortion, but it was too late by our state's laws. She pretended to be pregnant, even tried to gain weight, and bought clothes that made her look bigger. I stayed home every day until I had the baby. Everyone thinks it's her kid. I don't feel bad about it and won't ever tell the kid unless my aunt wants to or some big emergency happens where he needs a body part. She always said it's my choice to tell, but I think it's her choice too. She raised him. He calls her mama, and I wouldn't want to take that away from them. He doesn't look like me at all. He doesn't really look like my aunt either. He thinks his daddy is some guy she met at a bar she had a one-night stand with and she doesn't know who he was. He's an adult now and is settling down with his wife and they're thinking about having kids. It's sometimes weird because I know if they do they'll be my grandkids but they'll never know. I don't feel like a parent to him at all. I know he's my biological kid, but I'm not his mama. Every now and then it makes me sad, but I know it was the right decision to make. He's had a good life. My aunt and I saved up to make sure he could get a good education, and he did that. He knows me as his older cousin and we get along well. He's a good guy, hardworking, a good person, does what he can to help others. I'm proud of him. Here are answers to questions people have. The person that assaulted me is in jail for the rest of his life. He was arrested for something unrelated to what he did to me, but he won't be out of jail until he's in his 90s. I doubt he'll live that long. My aunt tried for years to get me to admit what was going on. She tried very hard. Anytime she saw me she asked if I was okay. She tried to get custody of me when I was a kid but it didn't work out. My parents acted like decent people and I denied anything was going out because of fear. Don't assume she could have done more. She did everything she possibly could, but I was too afraid to speak up. I know DNA tests exist. I don't know if he'll get one done but we'll talk about what to do if he ever does. It's complicated and I don't have the answers for what to do and neither do you. Everyone has their own opinions, none are right or wrong. Good intentions aren't always good advice. My parents are both alive as far as I know. I don't speak to them at all and haven't seen them since the early 2000s. I don't care to reconnect with them. The way I look at it, my aunt is the only mama I ever had and I don't need to worry about someone who gave me up for drug money. We went to a hospital outside of town to avoid seeing anyone we knew. Growing up everyone thought I was a shy kid. I was a big reader and spent most of my time inside anyway. No one thought it was weird that I was inside a lot. My aunt had a good job that let her stay at home and work once she started complaining about having to come in while pregnant. That helped us out a lot. Back then, you could call a store to fill in your grocery order and the grocery boy would drop them off, similar to how stores have deliveries you can order online now. My water broke in the middle of the night. We were lucky with that as our neighbors never saw us leave. No, I never went to college. When I was a kid I never thought I'd even graduate high school, but I did. I won't tell you what I do for a living or where I work. That's a strange thing to message someone. Regardless, I make enough to pay my bills and have a little savings. I used to work 3 jobs to make sure I could pay for his college once the time came. Now I only work 1. I don't like what I do but I work hard and I'm proud of that. Yes, I know my English isn't perfect. I type like how I talk and I don't care if you think that's bad. Calling yourself a grammar Nazi is a weird way to identify. I wouldn't want to be called a Nazi about anything nor would I be proud of that. But I guess you can live your best life and I pray you stop sending rude messages to people. I don't care about your opinions on abortion or if you think I'm a bad person for considering it. I was barely a teenager and it would have been the best choice for me. No, I don't regret having the child now, but I wish I didn't destroy my body in the process. I can't have kids now because of the damage that pregnancy caused my body. A few disgusting people have messaged me that this was SI, that I deserved it, or asked for details. I don't know what the hell is wrong with you but from the bottom of my heart I hope you die. The world doesn't need more sick flocks like you. Yes, I know my aunt is a great person. She's the best person I have ever known. Not just because she helped me. I think she would have done the same thing for anyone. She's an angel. How can men not notice when a woman fakes in pleasure? Especially with fingering, men should feel the contractions, right? The mysterious female pleasure. It's a topic that has been discussed ad nauseum, yet still remains shrouded in mystery and confusion. I've had my fair share of experiences in the bedroom, and let me tell you, there's nothing quite like the thrill of the chase. Picture this: a dimly lit room, a heated moment, and the sheer anticipation of pleasure. As a guy, you'd think it's easy to tell when your partner is faking it, right? Well, let me tell you, my friends, it's not always that black and white. I'll never forget one particular night during my college years. There was this girl in my class, let's call her Claire. Claire was known for her confidence and wild side, so naturally, I was intrigued. After a particularly wild party, a group of us ended up at someone's place, continuing the night's festivities. As the night progressed, Claire and I found ourselves in a drunken haze, tangled up in each other's embrace. Now, this wasn't your typical one-night stand. Claire had a reputation for being intimately adventurous, and I was about to find out just how true that was. Things escalated quickly, and before I knew it, we were engaging in some intense fingering action. Here's the kicker, my friends. As I worked my magic, my fingers exploring every nook and cranny, I swear to you, I felt those contractions. I felt the tight grip of her walls clenching around my fingers, seemingly confirming her pleasure. I was on cloud 9, convinced I was the master of all things orgasmic. But, as life would have it, the story took an unexpected twist. A few weeks later, a friend casually mentioned to me that Claire had admitted to faking it that night. Faking every single pleasure. I was floored, to say the least. How the hell did I not notice? How did her grand performance deceive me, even with the supposed tangible evidence of those contractions? It all seems so real, so raw. And that, my friends, is the tumultuous journey of the faked pleasure. It's a mysterious phenomenon that can leave even the most seasoned lovers scratching their heads. But hey, it's all part of the wild adventure we call intimacy. So, let this be a lesson to all the men out there. Don't be fooled by the smoke and mirrors of a fake pleasure. Pay attention to your partner, have open conversations about pleasure, and above all, strive for genuine connection. But, what if the real issue isn't the faked pleasure at all? What if it's something deeper, something more sinister? What if the real issue is the lack of communication and understanding between partners? What if the real issue is the pressure society puts on women to perform and satisfy their partners? What if the real issue is the fact that we still don't know enough about the female pleasure? These are questions that will haunt me forever. Questions that will continue to drive my curiosity and my exploration of the enigmatic world of pleasure. So, stay tuned for my next thrilling tale, where we delve even deeper into this mysterious realm. Until then, I'm off to do some more soul searching.
My abusive ex-husband refuses to let my young daughter be at my wedding because he's angry that I found someone better than him. Please help. My ex-husband and I were married for 10 years, and in that time we had 2 daughters, Emily and Gabby. It's been 6 years since we divorced because he cheated on me with a freshman in college and left me for her. It was a very hard time for me, especially because he did not make the divorce process easy. He would always comment on my body, saying I was ugly and that's why he left me. He said he hated being with me and doesn't like that I was not as tight as I used to be. I was in so much emotional pain. I had spent so much time on our relationship only to get cheated on and be emotionally manipulated. Emily knew why we divorced and she held some resentment towards her father for that. She comforted me a lot during that time, and I hated that I wasn't strong enough to support her since she was only 16. Gabby was only 8, so she was too young to understand what was actually happening. Even though he was a horrible husband, he was a good father to both of them and tried his best to rebuild his relationship with Emily, though it never worked out. He fought me for full custody in the divorce, but ultimately we ended with shared custody. The girls would be with me from Friday to Monday. I tried my best, but I would spiral from time to time since I was always seeing his partner whenever I picked the girls up. I was afraid that Gabby would start to see her as her mom, so I've done my best in therapy to move past this situation. But then the day of our wedding anniversary came. I tried my best to keep it together during work, but during my lunch break I went up to the roof and bawled my eyes out. That's how I met my husband Ben. He was there while I was crying and asked me what happened. Not only was it my wedding anniversary, it was also the day my ex decided to marry his affair partner. Ben listened to my concerns and stayed with me the whole day to make sure I was fine. He even dropped me to my house because I was too emotionally unstable to drive myself. Our relationship quickly developed from then on, and we bonded over our trauma. He told me his story about how he lost his wife and only daughter 10 years ago in a car accident. We went on many dates because I started to really like him, and he was an amazing person. He was nothing like my ex, and that was all I wanted. He was caring and mindful of my feelings. He was also really fond of my daughters. Emily started to call him Dad after a year of us dating. Ben hugged her and practically cried the first time it happened. He said it was so long since a daughter had called him Dad. It was such a healthy relationship for both of them, since Emily has said she lost her father the moment he cheated on me. Gabby also calls him Daddy Ben, and he tells me his heart melts every time. I was finally healing and getting back to my old self thanks to Ben. He was more helpful than any therapist I had ever been to, and he genuinely loved me. I wanted to have a baby with Ben, and we had a son 1 year ago. My daughters love him but are a bit jealous they have to share Ben with another person. Ben reassures them that there's plenty of him to go around, so they shouldn't worry. He always makes time to spend time with all of us. He takes me on dates, cares for the baby a lot, takes Emily shopping, and they have gotten their nails done together, which Emily loved, and he plays whatever games Gabby wants, no matter how girly. I can't begin to tell you how many times I've walked in on them wearing matching crowns, playing dress up, and having a tea party. Ben proposed to me when I was pregnant, and we have been planning our wedding since then. Of course we want our girls to be in the wedding as much as possible, so Emily is one of my bridesmaids and Gabby is my flower girl. The problem is that Gabby is still going back and forth from my house to my ex's house. My wedding is in 2 weeks, and my ex was fine with it at first, but now he's refusing to bring my daughter to my mom's place to get ready for the wedding. I spoke to him many times about it, but he says that he only gets to see his daughter 3 times a week and he is not willing to give up his days for some party. Thing is, his wedding was on one of my days, but I still let my girls go because I knew how important it was to him that they attend. He really does care for them. I tried to compromise with him by letting him take my days for a week so that she could be at the wedding. He did not accept and refused to let Gabby go. The wedding is on Tuesday, which is his day, and I can't change the date because everything is booked. We argued a lot, and interacting with him so much worries me because I don't want old wounds to open up. I don't think I can go through any emotional pain with him again. He's being really petty because he knows how excited Gabby is to be my flower girl and how heartbroken she will be if he doesn't let her go. This Friday, I went to pick up Gabby from her father's place and Emily was pissed. When I asked what happened, she said that Gabby was throwing a tantrum because of some stupid lie their father told her. Apparently, he was going to be taking them on a vacation on my wedding day. Gabby immediately threw a tantrum because she wanted to be my flower girl. I was furious that this cowardly man wanted to take my daughter away from me just so that she wouldn't be able to be a vital part of my wedding. This is beyond petty, this is selfish. I stomped my way into his house and demanded to see my daughter, and Ben came with me for extra support. I called my ex a coward for not telling my daughter the real reason why she can't be at my wedding. I told him to tell Gabby the truth or else I was going to tell her. I was surprised he caved so quickly and told Gabby that there was no vacation, he just didn't want her at my wedding. Gabby cried and said that she hates him. She ran to Ben and hugged him as she cried. My ex was not having it. He yanked her away from Ben, violently shook her body, and called her a brat who doesn't appreciate her dad. I don't know what came over me, but I saw red and slapped him for talking to my daughter that way. He called me a bitch and was going to slap me back, but my fiancé grabbed his hand and pushed him away. I managed to grab Gabby again and we were about to leave, but my ex was yelling that he wasn't going to let her go. I reminded him that this is my turn to have her and he agreed that he would let my daughter stay with me until the wedding is over. I have the messages to prove it. He couldn't do anything anymore, so we left. When we got home, Emily asked if it was possible to keep Gabby with us forever because she does not want to live with her dad. I asked why. Then she told me what was really happening behind closed doors, and my ex didn't care for them as much as I thought he did. Her dad has been really angry ever since I started dating Ben. It wasn't extreme at first, so Emily didn't think it was worth mentioning, but then he started insulting me to the girls. He would say that I downgraded by dating Ben and he would never be able to replace him as a father because the girls are not even related to Ben. It got even worse when he learned I was pregnant. He was mad that my life was getting better day by day, so he started asking his wife for their own kids. She refused every single time and it resulted in many fights. It got even worse when Gabby slipped up and called Ben Daddy Ben and my ex heard. From then on, he started lashing out at her for every small mistake she made. He even forced both of them to call his wife Mom. Emily refused, but Gabby was too scared to say no because she had been receiving all of the backlash from him and was scared that he would yell at her for not doing so. Emily doesn't have to go to her dad's house, but she said she goes either way because she has to protect Gabby from him. I was so sad that my girls were being put through this and I had no idea. I asked Emily why she didn't tell me and she responded by saying that she saw how happy I was with Ben, so she didn't want to burden me with anything revolving around my ex. She saw how I crumbled completely when we got divorced and didn't want to ruin that. I never wanted her to take the burden of it all though. While I am happy that she tried to protect her sister, I feel disappointed in myself that I was so busy with my new life that I neglected my daughter. Whenever they came home, they were smiling, so I took that as a sign that everything was okay. I told Emily that while I am proud of her for protecting Gabby, she should have told me because I am their mother and I will protect them from everything. I was going to let Gabby stay with my ex while I was on my honeymoon since he was crying about not being able to be with her on his days, but now I am rethinking that decision.
My kidnapped mother visited me and I'm not sure what to do. When I was 17, my mother vanished without a trace during the summer of 1996 in Cedar Hill, Missouri. I've never told anyone what I experienced 3 weeks after her disappearance. The news story showed bits and pieces, but I've never so much as uttered what I'm about to tell you to reporters, the police, or any of the countless doctors I've seen over the years. I'm not exactly what you'd call a model citizen, and my lucidity has been brought into question more than once throughout my life. I don't expect my recounting to set the world on fire, as they say. Nobody believes an aging addict with a violent criminal record and various diagnoses. Even still, it's time. She had me when she was 19, so when my mom disappeared, she was only 36. It's an odd feeling, outliving a young parent. As I'm sitting here now, I'm older than she was at the time of her disappearance by 7 years. She and my father never married and split up not long after I was born, but they remained close friends. She was a hairdresser in St. Louis, and the town of Cedar Hill, where my father lived, was about 40 minutes outside of the city limits. The distance wasn't anything crazy for joint custody parents by any stretch of the imagination, but my mom, Lori as everyone called her, wanted to get away from the bustle and the crime of the city anyways, so we ultimately moved there, just a few miles away from my dad. It didn't take long after we moved in for people to take to her. She was that way, my mom. Everyone seemed to just light up when they saw her, and she'd reciprocate with the most genuine warmth you could ever find in a person. It was infectious. I still wish to this day that I'd inherited, or at least learned to emulate that part of her, one of the many things that I've come to miss so dearly. She'd met a man named Jack and got engaged to him after only 6 months of dating him. Jack hated me from the start. I had poor grades and would fight in school and all of that. I'll admit that I was no prom king even then, but it was more than that with Jack. I could have been captain of the varsity football team with straight A's, and he'd have still hated me. It turned out Jack had a penchant for jealousy and was known for it by people he'd grown up with within the town over the years. It seems he was even capable of being jealous of a mother's love for her own son. I'd hear some of the other women gossip about it at my mom's salon when she'd step outside to smoke, and they didn't know I was in the back. That and his odd religious beliefs. People didn't seem to know what a nice, pretty woman like her was doing with someone that held such a tepid reputation from the community. But my mom seemed to always go for the oddballs. She always was a spiritual, but religiously promiscuous person. Her parents and sister died in a car crash when I was just a baby, and she took it hard. As far back as I could remember, she would sometimes cry about it when she'd have one too many glasses of wine, or when she thought she was alone. She'd always go to random different churches of various denominations, but I really think she was just desperate to find something that made her feel some sort of comfort about her loss. About 3 days before her disappearance, I'd heard her and Jack fighting in the living room. My room in that house was in the basement, so it was muffled, but it was something about some kind of church meeting. I think it was something about them breaking some rule or something, but I couldn't be sure. I've tried to dig into my memory and make the words clearer as to what was said, to the point of mental anguish, but they never do. They fought a lot during that time, so I just tended to tune the arguments out. Ultimately, the police never connected it to anything of importance in the case. She seemed troubled the next 2 days after that. She and Jack seemed to be getting along just fine on the surface, but I couldn't help but notice her agitation, even as in my own head as I was at that age. I could tell she hadn't been sleeping and was chain-smoking her Marlboro menthols, something she normally only did as an after-work ritual in our garage. She kept looking out of the windows like someone could have been coming to visit at any moment, but they never did. The morning she disappeared, she said something to me at breakfast before she went to work at her salon, the last place anyone in the public would ever see her alive again. She looked terrible and I could tell she still hadn't slept the night before, yet again. Jack had to deliver a load to Kansas City with his rig that day, so he had left early in the morning. As she was washing our plates in the sink, she asked me, "Are you happy here, Kyle?" I didn't know what to say to her at the time, so I said nothing. I hated that town and I hated Jack, and she knew that. I told her to leave him countless times. She said, "Today your grandma told me she'd love for us to come stay with her and your grandpa back in Chesterfield." Her voice was breaking up and I could see her shudder a little at the sink. She was crying. I reminded her that I never met Grandma and Grandpa and that they'd been dead since before I was born. I asked her if she was okay, and she said she was and that she was just tired. Afterward, I stood up to go to a friend's house. The last thing she said to me as I was heading out the door was, "After all these years I finally found a way through, Kyle. I have something to show you later. I love you, son." It wasn't the first time she'd gotten wrapped up headfirst into some obscure religion looking for answers, so I just told her I loved her too and left. And that was what I told the police was the last time I saw her alive. I lied when I told them that. Within a 15-minute window, in between clients at her salon, between 11:15 and 11:30 a.m., she was just gone. No trace whatsoever. Her lunch was still sitting in the microwave when the police arrived to search for any sign of fleeing or kidnapping, anything at all that would give them an indication of where she might have gone. They never found any evidence of distress or any sort of planned runaway, other than what I'd told her she'd said that morning. My first thought, one that was shared with her close friends, was that Jack was behind it, but his alibi was rock solid. He also apparently seemed genuinely distraught and concerned for her well-being when the police questioned him, and he was ultimately dismissed as a person of interest. The bastard changed the locks to our house on me the very next day. He wouldn't even let me into it to get the rest of my stuff, so I went to stay with my father on his farm just a few miles away. As days, then weeks went by, we began to lose hope. A serial killer and rapist that went by the name of Walter Kuiper was discovered to have been passing through the area right around that time, and the news and police seemed to be heavily leaning towards him as the cause. I couldn't shake those last words she'd said to me though. "Today your grandma told me she'd love for us to come stay with her and your grandpa back in Chesterfield." Has she had some sort of mental break? And what about the part about finding a way through after all these years? It was just too odd, too unlike her. Exactly 3 weeks after she'd vanished from the little salon she'd loved so much, I was sitting in my room at my father's farmhouse and heard a faint bristling in the yard from outside my window. I didn't think much of it as my dad's dog, Thunder, slept in a doghouse near the window. He always barked at strangers, so I figured it was just him. But it wasn't long after that the bristling turned to creaking and clambering on the side of the house, up past the gutters, and sounded like it was on the roof. It sounded heavy, much too heavy to be a raccoon or an opossum. It couldn't thunder either, unless he decided to grow opposable thumbs. Could it be a bear or some kind? A black bear, maybe, I asked myself. Black bears weren't common in that part of Missouri, but not unheard of. I was just about to get out of bed and let my dad know that we need to get our guns and go shoot whatever it was in the house when I heard something that chilled me down to the core of my soul, and froze me right where I lay. It was the crying of a woman, followed by the creaking open of the window that led to the attic. I wish I could say that I was brave at that moment, but I wasn't. I just sat there in my bed, petrified, quiet as a mouse, unable to move so much as a muscle. The crying was muffled now that it was coming from the attic. but you could still barely hear it. My father had taken my mom's disappearance particularly hard, and he was usually drunk and asleep not long after the sun went down, but I'd still hoped he'd heard something, and that maybe he had more courage than I was able to muster at the time, but never came. For what must have been several minutes I could hear the creaking of the boards in the attic above me. Still, that sobbing, she paced back and forth. There was a shotgun in the hallway closet about 30 feet away, and if I was careful about crawling out of bed, I could get to it long before whoever she was could come down the attack stairs and open the door that was right outside of my room. I was slowly removing the covers from my body, and she must have slipped and fell through this open cavity that was in between the walls because I heard her tumble down and crash right from the outer part of my closet. The house was old and there were lots of little places to fall through from the attic. I'd lose toys and baseball gloves and all kinds of things down in that little space, never to be recovered. From the sound, even in my excited state, I knew that for someone to fall there that hard, they must have broken several bones and would probably die in there before too long. But the sobbing resumed shortly after she came plummeting down into there. My closet door had been left ajar, and I could see the faint outline of a new hole in the plaster, where her foot must have kicked out during her sudden and unexpected descent. The sobbing stopped, and then the head of my mother pushed its way through the plaster in my closet. It was very dark, but I could still recognize the shape of her face. She looked badly emaciated, and her eyes didn't look right. They looked almost lambent like a cat's or an animal's eyes in the darkness. She was just staring at me with her head jutting through the hole. She gave me a face that was filled with deep commiseration, like she was sorry she'd let me feel so much worry and despair over those past 3 weeks. As wrong and awful as it was, seeing my mom's face after I was almost certain that I'd never see her again. Well, it's hard to fully describe how that feels. I wasn't thinking straight. I began crying and just mindlessly asked, "Mom?" I had no idea what to say or how to process anything that I was experiencing. She just started sobbing again, in that same way she had been the day she'd vanished. I finally found a way through. "Baby," she said. Her eyes glinted like opals in the shadow. I asked her where she'd been and told her that everyone had been looking for her for weeks. She just told me to come closer and that she had to show me something. I said I had something to show you, remember? She said. And then she repeated herself a second time with an identical tone, almost like she was rewound. And then she repeated it again, and again, on, until I couldn't take it anymore. I cried out to her to stop and told her she was scaring me. She stared at me with her mouth open. A silver ribbon of drool leaked out of it, and then she pulled her head out of the hole she'd made in the closet wall. I heard shimmying up to the attic from where she'd fallen, and then I could hear her crawl out of the window and jump off the roof, running into the woods. I sat there for a while, I'm not sure how long, just trying to process what I saw. I eventually gathered myself and grabbed the shotgun, shook my dad awake, and told him that there had been an intruder, but I never told him who I'd seen sticking their head out through the hole in my closet, out from the cavity wall. We called the police, and they did their best to connect it to my mother's disappearance, but in the end, attributed it to an indiscriminate attempted robbery. Months went by without her ever turning up, alive or dead, and then a year. I signed up for the army the day I turned 18, and my father killed himself while I was still in boot camp. He called me, at what was determined to be just moments before he put the barrel of his shotgun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. He told me, "I love you, son. Thank God you didn't see what she's shown me. Forgive me." In 1999, her remains were found not 500 yards into the woods, behind the house where she grew up with her parents and sister. She was nothing more than a skull and a handful of scattered bones. I had been dishonorably discharged from the army by then and was serving the first of a 5-year prison sentence, the first of 2 stints of a hard time I'd end up serving. And so Jack had what little was left of my mother's remains cremated, and still has them to this day. I've just been released from the second sentence. I've been staying at the motel near Jack's place for a few nights now. I've broken my parole, so there's no going back at this point. See, my mom's friends had said over the years that she was planning to leave Jack, something I wasn't even aware of at the time. I wonder if he knew that. Even more, I wonder what he'd have done if he found that out. Possessive, jealous Jack. Unable to even allow her to share her love even with her only son. I've done a lot of research on that cult of his, and I wonder what he might have subjected her to if he'd found out she would leave him. A spiritually desperate woman, willing to do anything to speak with her dead family again. We'll find out tomorrow night when I pay him a visit.
People who went missing, what happened? So, back when I was in Boy Scouts, my troop lost me, twice. In the same night. While I was still in my tent. This is not an exaggeration. The story is thus: we were at Camp Decorah, in Iowa. We had the idea to go and perform a raid on the counselors' tents cabins. I, however, was feeling ill, so I specifically said I'm not feeling well, I'm going to sleep. They acknowledged this, expressed regret that I was not coming along, and went to have their fun. They have their fun. They retreat into the woodline, then they take a head count. I am not in the head count. They expect me to be in a head count, because they forgot. So, now, there is a missing camper. The entire camp is set to searching for me. Sometime during this, a guy from my troop decides to, get this, check the tents. I am in my tent, as I should be, so he goes to report that I am found. I go to the bathroom during this time. Someone comes back to the camp, and checks my tent. I am in the bathroom, so I am not in my tent. I am now missing again. I get found sooner this time.
My sister-in-law bullied my wife her whole life because of being deaf. Now, she's begging us to help her buy hearing aids for her daughter. But my wife's response made her speechless. My wife and I are labeled as selfish for refusing to pay for my 3-month-old baby niece's hearing aids. Here's what happened. My niece was recently diagnosed with congenital hearing loss and is partially deaf in both ears. The doctors suggested that she be given hearing aids as soon as possible so as not to affect her development. However, my sister-in-law Kate can't afford the $1,000 to $4,000 per pair expense. especially without health insurance. So she decided to ask my wife, who hates her, during their grandmother's funeral. Important backstory: my wife hates her sister with a burning passion because of how Kate treated her. Ironically, my wife was born partially deaf in her left ear. However, instead of Kate being a supporting sister, she bullied her. It is more sickening how their parents turned a blind eye because Kate was their favorite child. This allows Kate to shout ugly remarks about deaf people into her sister's ear and more. They even ignored their youngest daughter's need for a hearing aid, as they didn't want to waste money. It wasn't until my wife's grandmother chipped in and bought a pair, but even then, Kate would constantly steal it and torment her sister. The last straw was when she intentionally broke it, and her parents refused to replace it. Once again, refusing to waste money on their youngest child's needs, my wife eventually moved in with her grandmother and made no contact. Skipping to the funeral, Kate sat down uninvited to speak to us. She wanted to ask an essential favor in the name of family. We already knew about her daughter's condition, so she asked to cover the medical expenses, mentioning how we could easily afford it. I guess she was expecting a yes because she was shocked when my wife said no and to F off. When Katie asked why, my wife just went ballistic. I was calling her out on her audacity to attend a funeral to ask for money and wanting the person you bullied for being deaf to buy hearing aids for your deaf daughter. She even quoted Katie's old remarks: "Deaf people are stupid. You dumb left deaf ear." After she had let it all out, Katie was speechless. She didn't even try to act apologetic. She just started shouting and calling my wife psycho for holding so much resentment towards her till today, and calling her selfish for refusing to help her niece over a childish grudge, even gaslighting her for the next 5 minutes straight to make her believe she's immoral. She eventually left screaming after calling us disgusting for having so much money and not helping family. I don't understand why I should spend my hard-earned money on someone else's child.
I just found out my doctor boyfriend has been drugging me to make me forget having intimacy. Please help. My doctor boyfriend has been drugging me to make me forget having intimacy. The first time it happened was when we were drinking and I wrote off my forgetfulness as a product of being drunk. We get drunk and have intimacy all the time, so it's not a big deal to me. I was confused. Since then, I have been having really weird gaps in memory that I have been explaining away as being tired, overworked, stressed, or anything else. I was going to ask my boyfriend about it, since he is a doctor at a major university medical center and would know how to help, but then I noticed that this seems to happen exclusively when I go on dates and sleep with him. A few mornings ago, I woke up with his dry DNA on my honkers several times with no memory of the night before. I know it's definitely him since he likes that kind of thing more than other guys would. I don't ever shame him for what he's into, but I at least want to know when he's doing things with me. I knew something was wrong and suspicious, so I planned to break up with him over my fear. I drove over to his place, but I don't remember anything else. I suddenly found myself on a date with him a few days later. I had not yet had the conversation to break up with him, but the plans were definitely made. I remember being at the restaurant, but absolutely nothing before that. My car and his car were in the parking lot too, so I was confused. I decided to play along when he asked me to come back to his place. I went back, and slept with him, but this time I was trying my hardest to be conscious of my memories and ensured that I didn't drink a single drop of alcohol. After a day at his place, I remembered the whole day, so I was starting to trust him again. Maybe I was going crazy and my boyfriend was actually a good man. In fact, he was a doctor and I could just ask him about my issues. Knowing he was a cardiologist, I knew it wouldn't be his forte, but he is still a doctor. I was going to ask him about my issues when he randomly pointed to these red bumps on my thigh and said I should be treating those sores. I had completely forgotten they were there. I couldn't remember where they came from. These little red bumps looked a lot like needle injections that got infected. I got so freaked out he mentioned them that I decided to leave. The next day he came over to check on me and I remember waking up in bed with more of his dry DNA on my chest. Then today he met me for lunch at my place saying we had agreed to meet. I never agreed to meet with him and would obviously never want to. He does this all the time, saying we agreed to do something I have no memory of. I am sick and tired of it and want him punished since I am beginning to realize that I am being used. This has started to affect my work life as well as I start to get paranoid when I see a boss walk into a room after making eye contact with me. I get paranoid that they are about to fire me. My friends also state I have been acting strangely and out of character. I have even begun to lose sleep and sleepwalk when I finally get some rest. I do not want the police to blow me off as some crazy lady, so I want to be sure when I eventually go to them. Is there a way to have blood work done to see what kind of drug he is using on me? My roommate sucked, but I sucked even worse. So let me preface with, I was 22, stupid, and a bit of an immature jerk. I'm in no way the victim of this tale, but I do think it's a funny enough story worth sharing of the battle of two crappy roommates. I had just moved in with my boyfriend as one of his roommates was moving out. When I met his second roommate, we'll call him Split P, I knew I was in trouble because his way of introducing himself was lecturing me on teas when he found out I was a tea enthusiast. Still, there's no rules against being a mansplaining jerk, so I stayed positive and indulged in his tea lectures. But then it started getting worse, quickly. Split P worked as a sound tech at a goth club. He was constantly bringing women home from the club, then taking substances and having crazy love-making in his room, not subtly. Again, we all get our bang on, I ignored it. But then, he started using my cat as a method of impressing women. My cat was on a strict diet of a specific type of food. I'm a cat nerd and I knew that keeping her on a regularly scheduled diet would prevent her learning to beg for food and would prevent obesity. Vale, Split Pea, who has no animal experience, started pointing out to his women guests that my cat's bowl was always empty. I had suspected he'd been feeding her more behind my back because she'd gotten overweight and started begging, but I finally overheard it happening where he said to his guest, "Yeah, they constantly neglect this cat. I always have to feed her." I walked in and said, "Hey, I overheard you and I know you have felt this way a long time without ever speaking to me, but I actually don't appreciate you messing up my cat's food schedule by feeding her more than she needs." Even though he had just filled her bowl, he looked at me with the most gaslighty eyes and said, "Oh no, I've never fed her." The woman he was with became uncomfortable, probably because of how blatantly and embarrassingly he lied, and left. This is all just to give you a feel for what kind of a cowardly diaper he was, but I didn't even get mad yet until he started bringing women from the club, at 3 a.m. when he got off work, to our apartment, making love with them, and then telling them to leave without walking them out. We lived in a dump of an apartment as it was all we could afford. This means our front door would only shut if it was locked. So asking someone to see themselves out just meant that our door would hang wide open in a really rough neighborhood, and we had a cat he supposedly cared about. I kept asking him to walk these women out so he could lock the door. I begged him. I reminded him my cat that he loved so much could run away. He didn't care. It got so bad, my cat actually learned to alert us when the door was left open. Literally, she'd come wake me up at 4 a.m. and then lead me down the stairs and show me the open door. Are you kidding me? This is when I knew I hated him more than anything I could presently think of and needed to start preparing to make his life unpleasant. It started off pretty simple. He was about to go on vacation for a week. We reminded him daily for 4 days before he left to please wash his dishes, as we don't want to wash his dishes for him anymore. I even went to see him the night before, while he was packing, and told him it was just another friendly reminder to get that done. Guess who didn't do their dishes? So I picked up all of his dirty dishes and I left them on his bed. I told my boyfriend that if he gets upset we can just tell him the dishes were in the way and we put them where he could find them. My boyfriend is a peacekeeper, so instead he picked up all the dishes and washed them. When he came back, we told him he needed to leave. We couldn't deal with him anymore and the dishes were the final straw. For 3 months he claimed he couldn't find another apartment. By this point I was done. I couldn't deal with this dynamic that resulted in our roommate treating us like doormats. I decided it was time to get crazy. So I sat on the kitchen floor and, as soon as I heard him come in, I just started crying. Wailing. Split Pea came in, alarmed, and asked what was wrong. I started crying at him that my boyfriend would never marry me if I couldn't get rid of our roommate. That it was time for me and my boyfriend to start picturing our forever here together and Split Pea was ruining it. For 3 days, I just walked around the apartment crying and wailing about how this would be the nursery but our roommate won't leave and let us share our love. He would bring women over and I would ruin their night. I would wait up until 3:30 a.m. when they would get home, offer his guest a bowl, tell them about all the other guests he has at this time of night, and then start crying and talking about how I just wish he would move out. I guess 3 nights of women leaving because of me was enough, because he suddenly found a great apartment, and would be moving out ASAP.
What's your most humiliating intimate encounter? I had FaceTime intimacy with a woman who is into pigmen. She's into men transforming into pig-human hybrids. I saw her account on Reddit and I honestly thought it had to be some kind of joke. I messaged her asking about this thing of hers and she went into an in-depth explanation. All about how pigs make her feel such a certain way. She talked about the curves of a pig and how she usually watched videos of pigs when going to town on herself. She then explained she has in-depth illustrations of creatures that are half pig and half man. A man's upper body with the lower half of a pig. She said these illustrations drive her insane. Fast forward a couple hours and we're FaceTime. I'm rubbing one out for her with the fury of 1,000 suns while making pig noises and she's using a toy. I kept making pig noises and squealing for her. The moment she said "Do it for me my little piggy," it was over. I nut so hard that the nut accidentally hit my own chin. All while squealing and snorting like a pig. Unfortunately, as I was making the noises, some of the nut got in my mouth too. She ended up crossing the finish line too and screamed so loud her microphone cut out. We both sat there unclothed. Then the post-nut clarity sank in. I really did that. I rubbed one out while making pig noises for a girl. If she recorded it, my life is essentially over. Then she asked if I wanted to go again and before I knew it I was oinking and squealing while going to town again. Of course the post-nut clarity hit me again and I told her I had to go. She asked if I wanted to do this again sometime. I said yes and she smiled the most genuine smile I've seen in a long time. She said, "Thank you for this. It was perfect and I can't wait for more." It has been a month or so since and we have been texting since. We plan to meet up sometime next month and do this in real life. Accidentally became a fugitive in a foreign country, all because of a goat. This happened a few years ago when I was backpacking through Eastern Europe. I arrived in a small, picturesque village in Romania, planning to explore the local culture, food, and landscapes. Little did I know that my journey would turn into an unintentional game of cat and mouse with the local law enforcement. On my first day there, I went for a hike in the rolling hills surrounding the village. I was told that a local farmer had some of the best cheese in the region, and I thought it would be a nice gesture to buy some directly from him. So, I ventured off the main path in search of the farm. After a bit of trekking, I spotted a small farm nestled in a green valley. As I approached, I noticed a goat standing alone near the fence. It seemed distressed and was bleating loudly. Being an animal lover, I decided to help. I managed to open the gate and guide the goat back towards the barn. As soon as I shut the gate, I heard sirens blaring in the distance. I turned around to see a police car kicking up dust on the road towards the farm. Panicking, I bolted into the hills. I ran through fields and over streams, the adrenaline surging through my veins. All this, while hearing the sirens in the distance, growing faint but never completely disappearing. I spent the next 2 days living off the grid, avoiding the main roads and sleeping in barns. I had become a fugitive in a foreign country, and all because I returned a stray goat. In my idle moments, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of my situation. On the third day, I decided to turn myself in. I walked into the village and went straight to the police station. I was ready to face my fate, whatever it might be. As I started explaining my story to the police officer, he burst out laughing. It turned out, the sirens that day were for a routine drill, and the police car wasn't even heading towards the farm. I had spent 2 days on the run for absolutely no reason. Am I the a-hole for telling my mom she should have gotten an abortion? I'm 19F, and my parents are 37F and 46M. When my now 13-year-old sister was born, I thought my parents would have decided not to have more children. I have a younger brother and older step-siblings who moved out years ago. But everything changed in April 2021 when my mom announced her pregnancy. My baby brother was born that September. My mom promised my siblings and me that we wouldn't have to take care of the baby, but that turned out not to be true. During my junior and senior year of high school, I had to act as a mom because my parents were either working or partying. I couldn't join after-school clubs or hang out with friends because I had to come home and look after the baby. My dad has been off work for nearly a year, but he rarely takes care of his own child. He always finds excuses to be out of the house. My little sister is unreliable, and my younger brother was exempt from babysitting because his football career and social life were apparently more important than what I had going on. If I mentioned being annoyed, I'd get screamed at for being ungrateful. Most of my friendships faded away because I was too busy babysitting. It was incredibly stressful, and I was relieved to graduate. My parents tried to keep me from going to college, saying I wasn't ready, but the real reason was they'd lose their free babysitter. I took out loans, and I currently live in a dorm. Fast forward to this Labor Day weekend, I decided to go home because I missed my parents, and my dog. We went to a barbecue, and afterward, my mom asked me to watch the baby while she went to a party. I told her I wasn't feeling well, it was very hot, and my mom forced me to stay outside. She blew up at me, calling me ungrateful and saying she had to do everything herself since I left for college. I got upset because it's not my fault my dad is a bad father, my brother gets away with not helping, and my mom can't stay home because she quit her job to start a business during the pandemic. So I said, well, maybe if you had gotten an abortion like you were planning, you wouldn't have to deal with any of this. She got really upset and went to her and my dad's room. I left and stayed at my grandmother's house for the rest of my visit. My brother called and told me my mom and dad were upset and suggested I could have said something else. I do feel bad now, but also slightly justified. I don't think it's my fault my dad avoids taking care of his children, and my mom chose to listen to my hyper-religious aunt instead of considering the implications of having a child, especially during a stressful time. So, am I the a-hole? My wife is considering divorcing me. I am angry and upset, and I am going to protect myself. I can't believe this is happening to me. My wife is considering divorcing me and I'm completely devastated. I mean, we've been together for 10 years, and now it's all just going to end? I'm so angry, so upset. I feel like I'm going to explode. I'm going to protect myself, no matter what it takes. I know she's been seeing someone else on the side. I can feel it in my gut. She's been taking and taking from me, but what does she ever give back? I'm not going to let her get away with taking half of what I've worked so hard to build. I never saw this coming, and now I'm just a mess of anger, sadness, confusion. I know I have to be strong though, and do what's best for me. I'm not going to let her get away with cheating me out of what's rightfully mine. I'm going to fight for what's mine. I'm going to make sure that I come out of this divorce with my dignity intact. It's going to be a long, hard road, but I'm determined to make it through. I'm going to be strong and make sure I come out on top. I'm going to make sure that I get what I deserve, no matter what it takes. I'm going to make sure that I get the justice that I deserve. I'm going to make sure that she doesn't get away with this. I'm going to make sure that she pays for what she's done. I'm ready for the fight. I'm ready to take on the world. I'm ready to show them that I'm not going to be pushed around. I'm ready to show them that I'm not going to let her take everything from me without a fight. I'm ready to show them that I'm not going to be taken advantage of. I'm ready to show them that I'm not going to be cheated out of what's rightfully mine. This is going to be a battle, and I'm ready for it. I'm ready to fight for what's mine. I'm ready to stand up for myself. I'm ready to face the world. I'm ready to make sure that I get what I deserve. I'm ready. Are you? Hit my brother and me? I'll attack you with 1,000 bees. I come from a family of sideline beekeepers, so I've been around bees my whole life. I have no problem being around creepy crawlies, and bees tend to be comforting in some way for me. It isn't like a pet though. More like a distraction from real life? Anyways, I'm weird and I like bees more than people. My dad is a sideline apiarist, so selling honey and queen bees is his side business. His main job is an architect. I started dating a junior athlete in high school 2 years ago. He was everything I wanted when I was going through my teen fantasy phase: tall, blonde, smelled great, and he was an absolute delight to be around. For the sake of the story, we'll call him Harris. Harris was a bit of a troubled kid. I knew his parents put pressure on him, but that often led to outbursts at others. Since I, his lovely bee-obsessed girlfriend, Was there at all times, I was the easiest to lash out at. Now, I'm not a short girl by any means. But Harris, like I said, was tall. At the time, I hated to admit that I was truly afraid whenever he decided to pick on me. But these events were so far and few that I ignored them, because, he was amazing. We had some of the best times, and he was the first, and only, guy I've ever had intercourse with. I'll spare you the details, but I thought it was going to be a secret between me and him. My honeymoon with him died a year later, when he invited me to senior prom. I was a sophomore at the time, so I was super stoked to go. I picked out a dress and everything, feeling on top of everything. I was a bit on the heavy side back then, but not to the point it was noticeable unless I took off my clothes. Still, dress. Something that isn't pants. I was excited. Who cares about arm fat? Well, apparently all of Harris' friends do. I almost forgot that these guys and girls were athletes, and I was not. As soon as I caught up with them, I found that they were in a total joking mood. Great, I love jokes. So, Harris really loves you, said one of his friends. I know. I could act smug. I grinned. Yeah, I replied, and I love him too. Cue a kissing interlude here. His friend rolled her eyes, said something about me being weirdly cute. Harris grinned, took a break for me to talk. Oh, really? Cute? Like what? A baby hippo. She probably meant this in jest, but I thought it was unusual. Maybe I was self-conscious, or something, and thought it was a fat joke. I didn't laugh, and I could feel my face go hot. I'd picked up a Coke earlier, and I was pretty sure it was heating up in my palms. True, Harris said in his ever so suave voice as he wrapped his arm around me. His hand traveled down the side of my dress, and he squeezed my stomach. Is my baby hippo. And I saw all of it. All of it? Excuse me, you mean all of her. And I'm right here, regretting to have ever come here. Insert more laughter here. Then their conversation took off. And I mean, it went from 0 to 100 really quick. He spilled the honey and told his friends, all 5 people here, about how me and him did the hot business. He said some off-putting comments about my body, and the parts he wanted to touch. I was trying my damn hardest not to cry, since this could have just been a harmless joke on their part. Needless to say, I wasn't having any of it, so I excused myself. Not to the bathroom, but home. I called my dad to pick me up, and not to let Harris' dad know. I wasn't in the area during spring break. My dad flew me and my brother, a year younger, 15 at the time, out to Pennsylvania for vacation. We went to the Hershey's chocolate factory and all, and I had a chance to clear my head. As far as I can remember, this was the last time my dad was actually pleased with me. When we returned in 10 days, Harris popped in a visit at a time he knew my dad wouldn't be home. My brother was, as he usually was, playing Minecraft on his PC in his room. I thought Harris visited to apologize for the whole baby hippo thing, but I was grossly mistaken. He punched me in the gut. I'd never been punched before up until now, and it was truly horrible. Not only did it hurt like hell, but it damn near made me puke and knocked the wind out of me at the same time. He grabbed me by the shoulders and shouted at me. He said that I shouldn't have left on prom, how I shouldn't have embarrassed him in front of his friends, and that I should have called him when I was in Pennsylvania. My brother came running down the stairs when he heard the commotion. I had this urge to bend over and stay bent over, so I couldn't really focus on him. All I knew is that he went after Harris, cursing, shouting, and crying. I ran the other way the best I could, trying to breathe first and foremost. It was hard to do anything or think straight with this horrible taste in my mouth and nasal cavity, like I'd thrown up inside my nose or something. It was gross, and it certainly pissed me off. Going for my phone was difficult, since Harris had already found his way away from my brother, begging me not to call the cops. I almost got the landline, too, but Harris snatched it from my hand. He broke the cover, took out the batteries, and then proceeded to beg again. This time, he didn't touch me, and I told him to get the hell out. I cleaned up the house, so my dad wouldn't see any of this. This was going to be my first and last fight with Harris, or so I hoped. At least he didn't check the landline. My brother was more injured, and certainly devastated. He couldn't even ask if I was okay, and I took it as he knew I wasn't, and only proceeded to cry. He really looked up to Harris. Let's go 5 hours ahead. 10 p.m., and I'm still seething. We found out my brother had sprained his wrist, so we rigged up some sort of easy to remove ice thing. My dad was a hard man, so I knew he would get upset at first when he saw the mess we'd gotten into. I can't remember what my intention was, whether I was going to tell him about Harris or not. I knew that he would be back the day after, so I had to exact my revenge right now. I shut the doors, windows, and waited for my brother to go to sleep. Now came the tidy bits. I shimmied into the other set of beekeeper clothes, the ones my mom wore when she was around to check on the apiary. I got the veil, the gloves, the boots, Gotta be prepared. That night was particularly cold, and it felt very unreal. I was unpacking thousands of honeybees, moving them around until I got the right number of frames, all under my dad's nose. And I was going to release them on a living human being. We had roughly 30,000 bees per beehive, and around 150 hives. Like I said, it was a side business, and we needed honey. I knew at the time that 1,000 or so bee stings could end someone, and I wasn't planning on going to jail. I was just going to make this hurt like hell. I isolated a fair number of bees between 2 frames with a bit of difficulty. There were maybe 900? 950? Not all of them would sting him, but I wanted to get him back for everything. Who punches their baby hippo, right? Once I had my bees in place, I set the single frame in its own hive closer to home. I called him and told him that I wanted to work some things out with him. No violence, none of that stuff. I lied through my teeth, telling him I won't tell my dad and that I was doing all right. He showed up 5 minutes later and stepped up to my door. The porch light was the only thing illuminating him, and the rest of the place was dark. I removed the frames from the hive. I walked up behind him, beekeeper boots squeaking on the steps, frame in my hand. "Hi, Harris," I said. I thought it would sound cool, but I was crying. My voice broke. Voice breaking was the least of Harris' problems at the moment, anyway. I was holding 2 open frames with almost 1,000 bees. Some of them were flying around, but I was fully protected. Harris? Not so much. I swatted him with 1 frame and thrusted the other one against his mouth, hoping I could get at least a single bee between his lips. A single bee sting hurts like hell, and will hurt for a while. But the thing about bees is that they are a part of a true hive mind. A single bee dies, and all bees in the area go into defensive mode, stinging at whatever flesh and deter whatever attacker they can find in order to protect the hive. The frame I hit Harris with likely unalived a few. The resulting scream was insane. I'd never heard him scream before. I almost expected the bees to fly away and hide in some other hive, but no. When bees defend, they really defend. It didn't help that Harris wore short sleeves and had his neck and face exposed, so the bees went for that. Fortunately for him, none of the bees went inside his mouth like I intended. They weren't stupid and wouldn't do that. Instead, they just kept stinging him. I ended up falling down the stairs and scrambling into the dark, looking to get away from him. Looking back, though, he was in no position to fight, and I shouldn't have ran. But I did, and I got to watch him try to fight his way through the cloud of bees. I think he learned that ending one bee won't scare the swarm. Good thing he is allergic to them. What zero-tolerance school stories do you have? My school's response to everything was to suspend you. These are all personal experiences I went through. My high school principal had a severe obsession with what I wore. Always would stop me in the hallway on the way to class to point out my clothes are too revealing, tell me to lean forward for a cleavage test, and would send me home for disrupting the school, and after 3 strikes you were suspended for 3 days. I never even wore revealing clothes, unless you consider a button-up flannel, tank top, and jeans revealing. I mean, I was 14, and 50-year-old men should not be concerned with the non-existent cleavage of a high school freshman. If you were tardy to school or to class more than 3 times a semester, you were suspended for 3 days. If it happened again, you were suspended for 5 days, and so on. 'Cause, you know, the best way to punish someone for being late and missing out on class is to cause them to miss 3 whole class days rather than only a few minutes they were late. If you took too many sick days without a doctor's note, you were suspended. I mean, you missed too many days. How about we cause you to miss even more? Not everyone can afford a $300 doctor visit to confirm you have a terrible cold. If you missed too many total days of school, suspensions/sick days/tardies included, you were suspended. I know this because I missed a total of 30 days of school thanks to being sick and previous suspensions, and whenever I tried to come back to school, they would suspend me for 3, then 5, then 10 days. When I pointed out the stupidity of it all, they just quoted, "We are a zero-tolerance school, and we do not support truancy of any kind," before handing me another suspension slip. At least I got to watch my dad call the head principal every name in the book.
I ruined my nosy friend's pregnancy announcement. I think she took the wrong test. My husband and I recently invited 8 friends for lunch and were asked if we could also include a new couple, Doug and Sasha. We have never met them, but everyone who was invited has, so we said sure. At one point, Sasha needed to use the restroom, and I told her to use the master since the other bathroom was occupied. I was helping my husband finish with food when Sasha came out of the master bawling and holding something in her hand. At first, I thought she hurt herself, but she said something to Doug that caused him to drop to his knees, cry, and begin kissing her stomach. All of our friends began screaming, jumping, and crying. It was insane. Finally, Sasha tells my husband and I that she is pregnant. Of course, we congratulated both her and Doug and gave them a bag for the test, their request. I will admit I did find it odd that she brought a pregnancy test and took it at a complete stranger's house, but I did not say that. Once everyone sat down to eat, Sasha said, "Hey, I hope you don't mind that I used one of your pregnancy tests. I just saw them and had to." I responded, confused, "I don't have pregnancy tests." Sasha says, "Yes, in your drawer." I asked Sasha if she meant the blue box in the back of my lower left drawer that was closed. She seemed to realize I was pointing out that she basically snooped and sheepishly said the box said pregnancy for a pregnancy test. I said, "Sasha, the brand is Pregnate, and those are ovulation tests. I do not own pregnancy tests. Did you take an ovulation test?" Doug freaked the absolute F out at me, saying his wife was not an idiot and could read a box. He insisted Sasha get the test out and show me that I was wrong. Sasha refused, saying she didn't need to prove anything to a complete stranger and insisted they leave immediately. One of the couples thought Doug and Sasha acted ridiculous. The other 3 couples thought I should have pulled Sasha aside to discuss my concerns and said I was an asshole for saying something in front of everyone. Honestly, the whole situation caught me off guard and everything happened so quickly. The whole thing was bizarre and confusing. I just didn't have time to put the pieces together mentally before asking about the ovulation tests. Also, I found out later through one of our friends that Sasha did take an ovulation test, and she is not pregnant. A kid pretended to be homeless because his mom wouldn't get him a churro. Last December, I visited my fiancé's home country with her and our kids for the holidays. We first went to the city where she was raised, then to the one her family lived in, and then back to the first one. On one of our last days there, we went for a walk on a large, slightly crowded street. According to my fiancé, said street is very popular and has a large homeless population. It's normal to get stopped on the sidewalk by someone asking for money or food. Anyway, we walked past an alley with food trucks, including a churro one. As we were walking, a young boy, 6 years old at most, approached me and said, "Mister, can you buy me a churro?" I stood there for a second, as I didn't understand what he was saying. My fiancé later translated it to me. Then the kid's mom showed up, shouted his name and pulled him back by his arm. My fiancé heard her scolding him that he couldn't ask strangers for stuff just because she said she wouldn't buy it. The boy started crying, "But I want a churro," and the mom reminded him he'd just had cake an hour prior. I don't know why, but I still giggle a little every time I remember that.
My parents ruined Christmas by kicking us out. I've been married to my second husband Mike for 4 years now. He's a jokester and loves to crack jokes all the time. He especially liked to joke with my brother Ethan and his wife. Ethan used to be okay with it till he started complaining about Mike taking it too far with his jokes. Ethan and his wife couldn't have kids, so they adopted a boy, Joey, 2 years ago. Mike has been making silly, light-hearted jokes that involving Joey's bio parents as a way to mess with Ethan and his wife. I already talked to Mike and I tell you that he's 100% means no harm and he was just trying to get them to react. At night, my parents hosted a big celebratory dinner and Ethan and his wife came. While we were eating dinner, Mike decided to tell a knock-knock joke to Ethan. He said knock knock, Ethan laughed and said who's there? Mike replied Joey's bio parents, then he bursted out laughing. Silence took over and Ethan's facial expressions changed. His wife called Mike an idiot, to which Mike replied with hey, relax, it was just a joke. An argument ensued and dinner was paused. My parents suddenly told Mike to leave, which I thought was too harsh. I tried to speak to them and get them to calm down, but Mom insisted that Mike leave. We left and Mike was complaining the whole time about how they overreacted. I called Mom later and she told me Mike was out of line with his hurtful jokes about this touchy topic and told me I was wrong for defending him and saying he was just joking. She said he ruined NY for the family, but I told her it was her and Dad who ruined NY celebration for escalating the situation and kicking him out. I told her he could talk to them, but again they were the ones who ruined NY celebration. She called me delusional for this statement and hung up. We haven't talked to them for days. I tried contacting Ethan but no response. My brother-in-law is making claims that he knows my secret and I don't understand. My brother-in-law, 30, is my sister's, 29, husband. We live on opposite sides of the country and my sister and I aren't that close, so I'd say that we don't know each other very well. We see each other at family gatherings maybe a few times a year, and he's always come off as a very average, kind of quiet guy. Around 2 months ago, I received a text from him out of the blue. It wasn't to check up on me or asking how I'm doing. The message said he's aware of what's going on but that there was no need for me to worry, and he'd keep it hush-hush. I wrote a quick message back asking what on earth he meant, but all I received back was another reassurance that I had nothing to worry about and that he was on my side. At that point, I gave up and assumed it was some weird joke, even though my brother-in-law has always been pretty serious. Recently I was in a Zoom call with my parents and sister. The first thing my sister asked when she saw me was, "Are you going to tell everyone the truth or just my husband?" Obviously I was confused and I mentioned the text message brother-in-law sent me, but my sister still seemed angry at me and I have no idea why. The next day, I called up my brother-in-law and asked him what the hell is going on with this. He was very cagey on the phone and just kept repeating rhetorical questions back at me, like, "Do you know what's going on?" I'll admit that I lost my temper at one point and snapped at him, since he wasn't giving me any answers. That was a bad idea, since this morning I got a new text from brother-in-law telling me that he tried to do me a favor that I clearly don't appreciate. He mentioned we'll see what happens this weekend, which is the next time we're all meeting for a late Thanksgiving. Honestly, I'm terrified. The thing is, I have no idea what secret my brother-in-law could possibly be talking about. I don't live a very exciting life and I mostly keep to myself. There's a still part of me that's scared of whatever truth he says he's about to reveal, even though I don't think I've done anything wrong. What do I do? My brother-in-law is making claims that he knows my secret and I don't understand. Hi everyone. Just before Thanksgiving, I posted about my brother-in-law harassing me over a secret. Well, Thanksgiving came and I was terrified. I almost backed out entirely and stayed in bed all day instead of going to the Zoom meeting. I did end up going in the end, and the first 20 minutes were incredibly awkward. My family and I aren't really compatible at the best of times, but there were silences that lasted minutes. Eventually my mother gave in and said we better get this over with. I've never been more terrified in my life. I somehow snapped my phone case in half because I fidget with things when I'm nervous. My brother-in-law started talking about how he tried to keep my secret from me, but I clearly wasn't grateful. And then he told everyone, "You should know that she's gay." Everything got really awkward again, except for a different reason. My whole family already knows I'm gay. I have no idea how brother-in-law never found out before now. I don't get on with my family, but me being gay has never been one of our issues. It's something nobody bothers me about and we don't talk about. My sister lost it with him immediately and said, "Really? This is what you've been going on about?" We ended up ending the Zoom call very early since my parents decided they were tired, but I think they both just didn't want to deal with this anymore and were sick of me/brother-in-law. I've decided to block brother-in-law's number in my phone, since other than this we had no messages anyway and I'm not going to be visiting my sister anytime soon. I ripped my stepsister a new one after she announced her exciting news. I'm a younger sister to Lori, 23F. Me and Lori have never been close since we had different dads. I was an affair baby. She's always resented me for ruining her family, but whatever. Lori has 6 kids. Yes. 6. Twin boys Beck and Joe who are 7, planned, a girl Liliana who's 6, unplanned, another girl, Angel who's 5. Planned, another boy, Keith who's 2, planned, and another baby boy Carl who's 9 months not planned. Despite the fact that Lori is incapable of taking care of these kids, 4 of them were actually planned. Because she knows my pushover mom will give her money and watch the kids. My mom even quit her job to do so, even turning her workroom into a nursery for Carl. We're pretty well off, but we can't do this forever. I try not to judge, and just ignore Lori like she does me. Even though when my mom is busy doing something like changing a diaper I have to step in and help. Especially with the twins since they're very rough with each other. Tonight at dinner Lori's boyfriend joined, a father to just Carl, as well as Lori's father. This wasn't abnormal so I didn't think anything of it, until my sister said she had some exciting news. I wished she'd say something else but I knew what she was going to say. "I'm pregnant." She would say. Everyone went dead silent until I said bruh, followed with a silent what the F, but she heard that as well. I didn't mean to say it out loud, but come on. Lori gave me a death stare, and said if I wanted to say something I should just say it. So I did. "Lori, this is your..." I take a moment to count, 6th child. You know we can't keep supporting you. Without mom you'd be on the streets, and you know that. Look at mom, she's so tired. She's always taking care of your kids and so am I. I'd bet I've changed more diapers than you have, you selfish excuse for a mother. She began to cry. And ran out into her boyfriend's car, he followed her and drove. My mother then began to cry. She left to go out Carl back to bed since he woke up. It was just me and Lori's father. He began to yell and told me I was a brat and Lori was a great mother, then he stormed off. As I'm sitting here in the morning watching the boys, I'm thinking, was I too obnoxious?
To win $3 billion, you have to survive 24 hours getting chased by a horror villain of your choice. Who are you picking? Why? Chucky. I'll kick that little effer so far. Freddy Krueger. I've been awake for longer than 24 hours before, I'll just play some Halo and wait for the clock to run out. Jaws. I won't even go in the shower. Zombies from The Walking Dead, I'd hear them coming and just climb onto a roof for a little while. Dracula, don't invite anyone in the house for 24 hours, what can he do? Be spooky at me through a window? I'll take the challenge and have the alien from A Quiet Place. The answer is Chucky. I just stand in an open field for 24 hours and kick him like a soccer ball every time he approaches. The things in Bird Box. Stay home, close the blinds. Jason Voorhees. He's slow AF so just walk briskly and keep him in sight and you're golden. Would be a long 24 hours, but manageable.
I'm stuck in a cabin with no cell reception. I'm not safe. I am an alcoholic. It feels gross saying that, shameful and finite. Most of my social life revolved around drinking at bars, drinking at the movies, drinking at concerts, and then it turned into drinking at home, which turned into drinking at work, and so on and so forth. I ended up on several almost life-ruining benders, the last of which culminated in my boyfriend Daniel finding me half dead in puddles of piss and vomit, having simply not shown up to work for several days. I finally acknowledged that something had to be done, and agreed to detox at Daniel's cabin and remain for the next 30 or so days because I couldn't quite bring myself to go to rehab. Detox was sweaty, shaky hell. In retrospect, I absolutely should have gone to the hospital, but when I was feeling better, I didn't mind it here so much. It's a little one-bedroom cabin in the high desert, 25 or so miles of dirt road to get there, and no one else around for miles and miles. That's part of why we chose it, because if I decided I wanted a drink, it would be virtually impossible to get one. At first, I felt a little like a prisoner, but we stocked it with snacks and games, and I also had my dog Peanut with me which made it more bearable. I had started hiking a bit up and down the land. It's undeniably gorgeous, just kind of barren and spiky. It is also incredibly easy to get lost, so I try to stay close. Daniel showed me all around, up the hills and around the junipers, and I was amazed at the wildlife that was so prevalent. Lizards, birds, rabbits, I even saw elk once from the distance. It was a beautiful little oasis for me to get back in touch with nature and find some semblance of recovery. I had been here about 2 weeks with him, but his time off work had run out. We decided that I would stay behind Sam's car but fully loaded with supplies, and he would come back for me when he could get away. I had only a little bit of cell service, but there was an emergency radio just in case, so I felt safe enough. The first couple of days it was fine. A little lonely, but peaceful, and I felt like I was getting a lot done. Daniel had printed some worksheets to go with the big book, and I was genuinely attempting some kind of introspection. But then a couple of things started to get weird. The first was when I was in the cabin feeding Peanut, I heard the outhouse door open and close. This was strange because it had a loaded spring and a handle that clicked shut. I went outside to check, but nobody was there so I shrugged it off. However, the next day I could swear I heard footsteps and voices passing by my window outside. I jumped up and looked, but again, no one was there. This was also easy to shrug off because when I was detoxing, I had some minor auditory and visual hallucinations for the first time, which really freaked me and my boyfriend out. Again, should have been in the hospital. But then things got weirder. I was sitting outside on the steps letting Peanut use the restroom when I saw a tall, skinny man emerge from the trees maybe 50 yards away, walking past. Scared the hell out of me. I called out to him, and he abruptly stopped. He slowly turned and stared at me for a long moment before turning away again and continuing on his way. I went back inside with the dog and tried to find a good spot to text Daniel. Luckily the text went through and I was able to tell him that I had seen someone, and it scared me. He told me that there were people dotted around the area, and even though the nearest one was 7 or 8 miles away, it wasn't out of the realm of possibility that someone was just out hiking or camping. He told me to just be aware of my surroundings and keep the gun nearby if I felt unsafe. He had given me a few lessons before he left, but I was still tentative when holding it. After that things were okay for another day or so, but the night after that I was dead asleep when I heard a loud knock 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 on my front door and what sounded like low crying. I shot up in complete and utter panic. With Peanut going absolutely batshit, I turned on the lantern, grabbed the gun, and stared at the door with my heart pounding out of my chest. I asked who was there, but once again there was no response. I took my phone to text Daniel, but there was no service no matter where I stood. For the rest of the night there was no more knocking, but I stayed awake for several hours until morning came, and I could breathe again. I slowly opened the door, and there was nothing but sunshine, birds chirping, and a slight breeze. Everything looked untouched. I was able to get service after venturing a bit from the cabin, texting Daniel again how scared I was. He was dismissive and said that I might have been hearing animals or the wind. I was trying to tell him that no, I know what I heard, but he brushed me off and said it might have been residual withdrawal and I was just hearing things. He asked if I really wanted him to leave work over some banging on the door. I begrudgingly saw his point, so I let it go. I decided I didn't want to go too far from the cabin for the time being, so I settled in for the day. I was super uneasy, but everything was normal all day. However, I think Peanut picked up on my unease because she didn't want to play with her toys or eat her kibble. She silently sat in her cushion while I journaled, painted, or did dishes, occasionally letting out a soft whimper. Even that night, while I was cooking a stew that normally would have driven her crazy, she was quiet. When I had to go to the outhouse, she tried to follow me, but it was getting dark, and I didn't like her to be outside when the predators started coming out. I did my business and went back inside but paused and looked back. By the steps was the bottom of a jawbone, large and falling apart. This was not inherently unusual in a place like this with cows and elk and a little dog who liked to collect things, but I was almost certain that it wasn't there earlier, and Peanut had never left my sight. I looked around with intense paranoia and ran inside, locking the door behind me. I brought out my phone to text Daniel again, but there were no bars. I desperately walked around, standing on the bed, climbing up on the dresser, but nothing. Inside the cabin was just the smell of burning stew, the sound of Peanut's whimpers, and my nervous confusion. I decided that I was going to get help one way or another, but I had a sickening realization when I saw the spot where Daniel hung the emergency radio empty. Nausea swept over me and I quickly made sure everything was secure, then resignedly retreated to the couch with the gun and Peanut. Hours passed and everything was calm. The wind swirled around, and rain droplets hit the tin roof, lulling me into a light sleep until around 4 o'clock when once again I was jerked awake by a knock 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 and low crying. This time, it was more desperate. Knock 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 over and over and over. I shouted that I had a gun and they needed to leave me alone, that I would shoot if I had to. The knocking stopped, and giggling started. There was a sound on the door like they were tapping their fingers, the thumping light and rhythmic. The taps and the giggling started to move, seeming to be moving along the side of the house. I followed it with my eyes as Peanut trembled next to me. It stopped at my window, same rhythmic taps and the giggling growing deeper and more sinister. I flew to the window to open the curtain, but nothing was there. Still, as I examined the land in the faint light of dawn, I swear I saw something crawling on their hands and feet into the scraggly juniper trees. I waited until morning to go outside, gun by my side, dog safely in the house. I was terrified, but besides the jawbone nothing was out of place or different. Still, something was off, and I realized that I didn't hear any birds chirping that day. It was completely silent. I desperately walked the perimeter of the cabin site, further than I was comfortable, trying to find service. My phone was not picking up anything. I didn't know what to do except hunker down, wait for Daniel to return, and pray for service. But as I went back to the cabin door a bad feeling came over me. Inside, I found that the place was in absolute disarray, drawers dumped, food spilled, glass shattered. Worst of all though, Peanut was missing. There were flecks of blood dotting the floor, but no other trace of her. I broke down and ran outside, finally feeling anger. I shouted, screaming my dog's name, hoping she had somehow gotten away. I walked until I was sore, my voice hoarse and my face covered in tears. This time though, I started hearing the giggling during the daytime, those threatening little laughs. I couldn't tell which direction it was coming from, only that it was growing closer. I reluctantly retreated into the cabin, looking out the window and hoping I would see Peanut. That's where I am now, writing this on my phone, and praying that Daniel comes back soon. The giggling hasn't stopped, and dusk has begun. In the distance, I can see something crawling out of the trees. I don't understand what's going on. I wish I had a drink.
What's your scariest home alone story? Back in the early 90s before cell phones were prevalent, my parents left me home alone for the first time to make a late-night store run. I think I was maybe 9 years old at the time. We lived in a rural area with few neighbors, so I thought it odd when an unfamiliar car suddenly pulled into our driveway and cut the lights. It was pitch black outside, except for our front porch lined and the lights from inside the house illuminating the driveway. I was in the living room watching TV at the time. I heard the car, so I peeked out our large bay windows and watched as a strange, blond man exited the car and walked up to our front door. He saw me right away through the windows. His eyes locked on me as he lifted his finger in a come-hither motion. I had never seen him before in my life. I ran as fast as I could to my parents' bedroom at the other end of the house. I locked the door and called my uncle to tell him there was a strange man wanting me to answer the door. My uncle told me to stay hidden, then hung up the phone and showed up at my house in record time. By then, the weird man at the door had disappeared.
How did you realize how poor or wealthy your family was? I grew up on a farm where we worked hard and learned a good work ethic. My father was an air traffic controller, but farmed full-time as well. Both of my parents grew up loved, but very poor. When they met, he was a Marine and my mother was a secretary for the government. After they married, my dad got on with the FAA, moved out of the city and purchased 100 acres, very cheaply, that had an old farmhouse on it. My brother and I were born a few years later. By then, the farmhouse had been updated, and that's where we were raised. Growing up, my dad would continue buying land around or near us. When old enough, we learned how to disc, plant, combine, bale hay, etc. I found out that they had money when I went with him to purchase farm equipment. I was probably 13 or so. John Deere dealership was about an hour from us, and I was bored to death, but stuck near my father. He purchased a new combine and a new tractor as his current equipment was getting older and needed more maintenance than he wanted to deal with. I almost passed out when I saw what the prices were. I cannot remember exactly, but the tractor was around $55,000, and the combine, with all the heads, etc., was around $100,000. For reference, you could buy a new Ferrari for around $60,000. Now, as a farmer, he depreciated his equipment, but you still had to pay for this stuff somewhat. As I got older, I understood how things worked, equipment/land, farming in general. I'm older now, my parents passed away, and I live on the same farm with my wife. My daughter was raised here. We still farm although most land is rented out. We have about 1,800 acres now. My folks, although very well off, never showed it, were terrific parents/grandparents, and taught us good values and showed us how to be good people. Miss them terribly, and I'm glad that my daughter was able to see what was built up by them, and what awaits her as she gets older. She is a veterinarian, but lives near us, but I imagine as she gets older she will take over. When did you realize that someone close to you was actually messed up? When we were kids we were both abused physically. I only saw his dad once but I knew at least some of the horrible stuff he went through. We were best friends from like 6 years old. Around the time of high school he started to get insanely bad about bullcrapping and bragging. We had a tight group of friends. We both had girlfriends who were from our friends circle going back years, but this guy would brag and boast about all the women he got when his girl wasn't around. It was very messed up and I had to tell him to knock it off a few times because his girlfriend was my friend too. Well, it got so bad his girl dumped him. Then I couldn't stand it anymore either and stopped hanging out with him. Then he joined the army and we all hoped it would fix his attitude a little. Skip ahead about 15 years. He's married and has 4 kids and moves back to town with his wife. He wants to meet up and reconnect. So I agree, and while he seems still the same guy, the bullcrap is at a minimum. We have a few good times hanging out. Then I find out his whole life is rented. House, car, sofa, TV, kitchen table, bed, even his kids' bikes are on a rent-to-own scheme. Then he starts replacing things with bigger and bigger stuff. The 60-inch TV becomes a 90-inch TV. Then the bullcrap starts up heavier and heavier. My wife doesn't feel comfortable, particularly around his wife. She can't put her finger on it but she decides she is done hanging out. Now his kids are amazing. His oldest is incredibly bright, like the kind of kid who doesn't want to watch TV and spends all her time tinkering with electronics and stuff. She was literally the smartest kid I had ever met. All his kids were so well behaved and smart and kind. But by this point I can't take the bullcrap anymore, so I stop hanging out with him. For 2 years we don't hear a word from them. Then I find out through his mother that he and his wife both were arrested and convicted for forcing themselves onto the children. His mom was taking care of them but there was a lot of DHS and doctor involvement. Apparently it was a long time thing and his wife was involved with it as well. It killed me to hear it. We all knew he was messed up, because of the excessive attention-seeking behavior. But those kids were so special and he hurt them. Ida for leaving the village while pregnant? I know this is a long one, but please bear with me. I really need advice. So my boyfriend 28M and I recently found out that I 25F am pregnant. Before my pregnancy we were living together, in a house on a small farm which his parents own. His parents and 2 younger brothers, 21M, and 24M, also live on this farm and all have lived here forever. The grandparents raised the parents there or something of that sort. I've been having trouble with boundaries, where the in-laws would drag us with them wherever they go to a point where it becomes sickening. They remove the stove from our kitchen so that we are forced to have meals with them at certain times. Everyone gets in one car to do grocery shopping for the house every Saturday. All of the kids are dragged along to the parents' work functions, family outings, visits with friends, etc. Mill dragged us, me, boyfriend and brothers, to another party on a different farm on the other side of the province for a weekend. At this point everyone knows I am pregnant and having a really hard time, because I am ill and feel terrible most of the time. When I asked my boyfriend if we could stay for the festivities, but not sleep over, we were to sleep on bunk beds with his parents out in a field in a bungalow. His mother actually said, "You're terrible children, You should go play in the field or go swimming. His parents are under the full impression that we are children and that their family is a small village that will stay together. I've had many calm conversations with my boyfriend about how I felt about this situation, as I am scared to raise my child in these circumstances. Have you ever made fun of a suicide victim? A month or so ago, one of my coworkers took time off of work because her 17-year-old son tragically passed away. I live in a small town, so words gets around fast. Apparently, her son was facing a lot of bullying in school and was outcast by everyone due to reports of him engaging in intimate activities with a goat. Whether these rumors are true or not, I will never know. I assume he was battling depression from it all, as well as having his reputation be tarnished forever. He managed to get a hold of a firearm and tragically took his life with it. His mother was the one who found him in his room. Today was her second day back at work. This morning I gave her my condolences and we all expressed our grief towards her and tried helping her settle back into work. Towards the end of my 10-hour shift I was very exhausted, and decided to sit down. My coworker and I made eye contact. Not thinking, I put my fingers to my head and pretended to squeeze the trigger as the universal sign of this sucks. As soon as I did that I realized my mistake. She immediately got a horrified look on her face and I turned away immediately. She rushed over to me crying and attempted to slap me for my actions. Something I cannot even blame. One of the other coworkers saw her attempt this and managed to restrain her. She actually teared up but managed to explain through it all what I did, and when she did the other co-worker was just as horrified. So much so, the other co-worker actually slapped me instead. At the end of the day I got written up for my behavior and am now set to meet up with the manager as well as my co-worker to discuss my actions. Not a great way to end my Friday. What is the best thing someone has done in college? At university, a friend met a girl in a club and decided to head out together back to his place. It was one of those 5-bedroom Victorian houses students sometimes rent in the UK. They return to him, and he realizes he's not got his keys and the house is empty as everyone else stayed out at the club. Bugger. But this potentially fatal obstacle doesn't deter our protagonist. With a belly of Dutch courage and his massive intellect, he sets about forming a plan to break into his own home. Then bam, he realizes that a window at the front of the house might still be open. But this isn't a regular window. These houses have a bay window, like a half hexagon that juts out, with a large bottom window and small flap window at the top, maybe 9 inches high, with a sliding latch that can prop open the window during the day. The latch has small holes that hook onto a small half-inch rod at the base of the window. It's about 6 feet to the base of the flap. Sure enough, it's propped open, so he fancies his chances. The problem is that he can't get the leverage to push himself up through this gap. Again he weighs his options. So, sure enough, he asks his new acquaintance for a boost. She dutifully obliges, takes a knee, and clasps her hands together. If anything, she's as keen as he is to get inside. So he pushes off her hands and manages to get his entire head and torso through this flap, so his center of gravity is directly on top of that tiny rod that keeps the top flap open. Ignoring this discomfort, he realizes how epic a drop is on the window's other side. If he leans forwards and slides in, it'll be a straight 6-foot drop onto his head on the other side. But it's other than that, or give up. And he's come this far, so he decides to commit to the maneuver and style it out at the bottom with a sick ninja roll. And that will get him even more cred than merely breaking in, right? So he commits this dive completely, total. Body weight forwards, arms outstretched above his head, ready to absorb the weight of his body and deftly curl his knees up, complete this deft acrobatic move and go round and open the door. Suppose it wasn't for that damn little rod. As he commits, the rod snags first his belt, then jeans, then underwear, so that at the same time as he descends, every layer on the bottom half of his body remains precisely at the entrance at the window. Then, as they reach his ankles, they catch entirely. His body is then swung upside down like a pendulum into the window with an almighty crack, where he dangles. The girl, still in position from giving the boost, stands up to see this guy pinned upside down just inside his own home, crown jewels pressed against the inside of the window, completely unable to free himself. She gazes at what must look like a hot dog, and 2 meatballs slammed against a glass table meet her at eye height. There he remains for several minutes before she has to leap up and unhook his trousers and underwear when he clatters to the floor, completely forgetting the need to break his fall with anything other than his face. Somehow he gathers his composure, readjusts himself, and lets her in for the night. They are married now.